Dhyaye nityam mahesham rajatagirinibham charuchandravatamsam ratna kalpojvalangam parashamrgavara hastam prasannam padmasenam samantatstutamamaraganayr vagakritim asanam vishwadim vishwabijam nikilabhayaharam panchavaktram trinetram. We meditate ceaselessly upon that great Lord, Shiva, who sits in the lotus posture, absorbed in the deepest samadhi. All about him, gods and demons and other beings are hymning him. He has 5 heads and 3 eyes, and is holding an axe and a deer in his 2 left hands, assuring fearlessness and granting boons with his 2 right hands. He is the ground upon which the universe rests, and the seed from which it springs forth. He is the clear light of consciousness. He flashes as if adorned with many ornaments, and shines like a mountain of silver. Karpura Gauram Karunavataram Samsarasaram Bhujagendraharam Sadavasantam Hridayaravidne Bhavam Bhavani Sahitam Namami Kailasapirtasana Madhya Samstam Bhaktaischanandhyadhivisevyamanam Bhaktartidavanalama Prameyam Dhyayer Umalingita Vishwarupam Dhyayer Umalingita Vishwarupam Om Yathanir Dahika Shakti Ramakrishne Stitahiya Sarvavidya Sarupam Tam Sarada Pranamamyam Om Shanti 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 Om Ganganeshaya Namaha Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Saradar Panam Astu. May this be an offering to Ma Sarada. It's good to be back to our Friday morning classes, and as you know, the Friday morning focus has always been to study primary sources verse by verse, but a different sort of primary source than the kind we study on Thursday night. So Thursday night primarily we want to study tantras, but you'll have to recall that most tantras are in effect padhatis, ritual manuals. So while a tantra, as you know, will have 4 sections, typically, not always, but typically it's going to have a philosophical section, it's going to have a mystical practices section, it's going to have a ritual section, and sometimes the 4th section has to do with codes of conduct or ethical practices, which can be very weird and very idiosyncratic as per the text and as per the tradition. For example, wear only yellow, or always be drunk. The Bagalamukhi Tantra that we were studying yesterday, it says, Gritam pibet. What does it say? Sura pibet. One should be drinking sura, and one should be with one's shakti while performing this puja. It could be that, or it could be something like you must sleep on the ground and abstain from food, solid food, for 40 days while you perform this 44-day sadhana, or something like that. Or it could just be you must bow every time you see a kumari, a young woman. It could be every time you see a crow, you must say this mantra, Kashodari, Mahabale, Muktakeshishwari, Shankara Priye, Namaste Shankara Priye. There's that beautiful mantra, right? Mahodari, Shunya here. Some of you remember it. I forgot that mantra. But there's one mantra from one Padati that says every time you see a crow, you say that mantra. So it could be like that. It could just be things that you do as you move about the world in order to tune you to the frequency that tantra is coming from. But often it can also be temple architecture. So it could be here's how you design the temple. On this fortnight day, on a hill that resembles a tortoise shell, between 2 rivers, and by a cremation ground, this is how you construct the temple. This is the yantra you draw on the ground when you break earth. So it can be architectural, it can do with dress, and it can do with diet, and it can do with codes of conduct with other peoples. That's called the Charya Padas. These are the 4 things that you expect to find in a tantra. But often, the way these texts have been disseminated throughout history, especially in the 18th century and 19th century, you tend to just get the ritual portion, what is sometimes called the Yoga Pada or the Kriya Pada. So then you have a new 4-fold classification. Now you're not expecting to see philosophy, nor are you expecting to see codes of conduct. In fact, you're probably only going to get the yantra, the sacred geometric diagram in one sense, but also the retinue of deities, or like the conglomeration of energies that make up the central deity of the Tantra. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you'll get the mantra. Very rarely is this mantra going to be written down. It's a taboo, actually, as you know, in the Tantric world, to write mantras down. So instead you'll get them elliptically. I might maybe pull up an example for you to see. There was that Bagala Mukhi Tantra that we were chanting from last night. And there's, I think, a really, really good example of what we're talking about, because you can see the mantra is given, but it's not given literally. It's like it's given in code. It's given elliptically. So let me see. I'm just going to pull that up right now. So this might be a very good example of like a more modern Tantra, or the way that Tantras have been disseminated in recent years. So if you look over here, you'll see here's the Bagala Mukhi Tantra. It's our own translation and we're kind of working on it. It's not yet fully complete, but it begins with the Dhyana mantra. So it starts Atta Bagala Mukhi Tantram. This is the Tantra for Bagala Mukhi. And then you get a Dhyana mantra, which we've translated as follows: in the midst of the nectar ocean pavilion made of wish-fulfilling gems, seated on a lion throne atop a jeweled platform, whose complexion is entirely yellow, whose limbs are adorned with yellow garments, ornaments, and garlands, I worship the goddess who holds a mace and grasps the enemy's tongue. I worship the two-armed goddess, Dvibhuja Devi, who seizes the tip of the enemy's tongue with her left hand, tormenting them, while striking with a mace held in her right hand. She is resplendent in yellow garments, Pitambari. I bow to that two-armed Pitambara, yellow-clad one. So this is a Dhyana mantra which helps you visualize the goddess. But while you get the Vigraha, or the Stula Sharira, like the physical form, it's arguably more important in your ritual to have this, the yantra. And again, the yantra is not drawn. Like very rarely will you see the yantra like iconographically depicted. It's just described. Triyastram Shadashram Vritam Ashadalam Padma Bhupuran Vitam. Now notice, this just says it's a triangle, a hexagon, and a circle, together forming a lotus of 8 petals, or together with, I should say. Together with a vritta can be covered. So this is actually not a good translation. I would amend this to encircled by, I think. Oh. Okay, it won't let me. It's okay. This should say encircled by a lotus of 8 petals, complete with a protective enclosure, or enclosed within a bhupura, and this is the yantra. Now notice, the triangle is not described as downward facing or upward facing. Sometimes it will be. Like in the Kali yantra, it says adho trikonam, downward triangles, pancha trikonam, there are 5 triangles all pointing downwards. Here it doesn't say that. So it would be perfectly valid, I think, if somebody drew this yantra with the triangle in the middle pointing upwards, and someone's also valid in drawing it with the triangle pointing downwards. And you can see how this reflects a kind of parity in the Sri Vidya. In the presentation of the Sri Chakra, there's the Samaya Kula, which will have the upward pointing triangle in the center of the Sri Chakra, with the dot, with the bindu outside the triangle. The bindu is the base of the trika, like you would expect to see in a trident. Whereas in the Kaula Marga, which we belong to, the bindu is in the center of the triangle and the triangle is pointing downwards. So this is actually very inclusive. In this Tantra, by not defining down or upward, it's kind of like opening the door to both kinds of kulas within the Sri Vidya, because this is arguably like a Sri Vidya type of Padati. Then, here's what I wanted to show you. This is called the Mantra Udharaha. Now, when the mantra is given, it is not to be written down. That's a taboo, as we just said. So instead, it's going to be given to you in like a kind of coded language, which the guru will then help explain, or which you, if you have the discernment to do this, can decipher for yourself. So this is a kind of literacy that you as tantrics, you as primary source students, should acquaint yourselves with. And I think we had a whole class on it. Like it was during Bagalamukhi Jayanti, during a time when we were observing secrecy and silence. It was in that time that we transgressed the goddess by just giving this teaching, which is how to work with something like this. So let's just look at this is important. This piece over here, this number Shatrim Sha, so 36, right? This is so important that this phrase Shatrim Sha Akshari Vidya. We know this is a Vidya. Vidya here is the same as mantra. But this is what helps you work out the mantra, because it's going to tell you how many syllables are in the mantra. And then as you decipher the mantra, you have to count and see whether or not you got the right number of syllables. So it's going to say Shatrim Sha 36 Akshari. There are 36 indestructible elements to the mantra, or to the Vidya to be specific. Vidya is the feminine form of the word mantra. So Shatrim Shad Akshari Vidya. This is the 36 syllable mantra. So we had a whole class on this. I won't like belabor the point anymore. We can obviously go and watch that lecture where we spent an hour or two, maybe 3, on just this thing. But it basically says, begin with the pranavam, which we know is Om. So begin with the pranava. Then you need the Sthira Maya Bija. This is the secret Bija of Bagalamukhi. It's the Maya Bija, so we know it's the Hrim Bija. It's Kama Kala Im plus the Hridaya, the Lajja Bija. So that's called the Maya Bija. But this is the Sthira Maya Bija. So in some traditions, that's going to be Hladini or Hla plus Hridaya, meaning Halarim. But in other traditions, like in ours, it's just Halim. So whether it's Halim or Halarim, that might change from tradition to tradition, but the fact is it's called the Sthira Maya Bija. Then you say Tatascha, and then Bagalamukhi. So the name is there. Tarante, and then after that you say Sarvadushtanam. Then you say Tato Vacha Mukam Padam. Then Vacha Mukam Padam. Stambhayeti. Then you say Stambhaya. Then you say Jiva Kila. So Stambhaya Iti. So Stambhaya Iti, then you say that. Tato Jiva Kilaya Iti. Padadvayam. And this means Jivam Kilaya, these 2 words, Padadvayam. So some people interpret this as Kilaya is said twice. Kilaya, Kilaya. This word is said twice. Some people interpret this as Stambhaya and Kilaya are the 2 words. Yeah. Or Jiva and Kilaya, Iti Padadvayam. These are 2 words. Then comes the word Buddhim Nashaya. Paschat, after that, Sthiramayam again. And then the Punaromkaram. And then again Om. Followed by Swaha. Iti Padam Antataha. And this is the last word. So we know the mantra must end with Swaha. We know it's a Vidya. And as a Vidya, it cannot end with Namaha. It cannot end with Pat. It cannot end with Vashat. Those are all masculine forms. It should end with Voshat or Swaha, which is a feminine form, which would make it a Vidya. So therefore Sanskrit grammar can be very helpful here. Counting bijas, Sanskrit grammar, those are like the basic things. But the elliptical language of the Tantra, that's not a basic thing. That must be like carefully trained through exposure to primary sources. So when you put all this together, what you end up getting is the 36 syllable mantra, beginning with the syllable pranava, followed by the bija for Bagalamukhi, Stiramaya bija, then the name Bagalamukhi, then the phrase Sarvadushtanam, then the words Vacham Mukam Padam, then the command Stambhaya, followed by the command Jivam Kilaya, then comes Buddhim. I use usually Vinashaya, but some people will have a pat, so they don't need the V, because the pat is covering a syllable. The V doesn't need to be there, so that can be also debatable. And then once more the Stiramaya, once more Om, and finally Swaha. This is known as the Shatrim Shadakshari, and the bestower of all prosperity. So this mantra Udhara is very important. Udhara means to extract, and the mantra Udhara is the process by which you extract the mantra from these elliptical passages in the text. So you get that. Then comes the puja. And the puja is mostly what we talk about on Thursday evenings. You can't do the puja if you don't have first the yantra, and mainly the mantra. Without the yantra and without the mantra, you can't really perform the puja. So a lot of people have puja vidhis, but they just, have the yantra, but it's not part of their document, it's not part of their vidhi. It's just something that they have, like the Sri Chakra or the Kali Yantra or something. Some people don't have the mantra written in their vidhis. They won't need it because their guru gave it to them through their left ear. They were initiated in a lineage. So they just need a document that tells them what to do every single day. And it will pretty much say like, okay, you wash your hands in this way, you sit facing this direction, and you offer this, and then you offer that, and you say these mantras while you're offering the following things. That's what Tantra is mostly about. That's what a primary source is in the modern context primarily going to be about. So that's what we do on Thursdays. But then my idea, which we haven't really got into in quite some time, but hopefully we can get back to soon. My idea was to follow up the Thursday night puja class with the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra class. And I thought that would be really cool because the Vijnana Bhairava is an atypical Tantra. It's not like all the other girls, so to speak. Like where other Tantras are about yantras and about mantras and about like puja vidhis, the Vijnana Bhairava seems to kind of laugh at all of those things. It's kind of like, oh, that's cute, but that's like a sweet that you give to children, or a goblin story that you tell them to get them to do the right thing. And it goes further. It says it's there to help dumb people meditate. I think the word they use is manda or dushta or something dull intellect person or something. Their buddhis are clouded. So those whose intellects are dull, in other words, like superstitious and religious people, they need rituals and they need yantras and they need mantras and they need all of those things. The Vijnana Bhairava just says, you're different. You've graduated from those things. Presumably you've practiced those things for years, if not lifetimes. Now here's a higher vidya. And this is of course like very much like Dzogchen or Mahamudra where it's like, okay, here's a higher teaching, and it's premised on like just pure awareness techniques, like open meditation. It's an interesting text because it leverages very sophisticated tantric practices, like listening to the Anahata Dwani, which is a very refined mystical state, or visualizing the upward pointing triangle, the Red Tilaka, which you're going to hear about in the Yogini Hridaya as well. So it does reference very high level, mystically refined practices within the tantric tradition. But then it also references like having sex, laughing at jokes, eating and drinking good, fine foods and beverages, like looking at the wall, watching the way light plays against the wall, like looking into an empty cup, spinning around in a circle and falling down, like just childlike, simple, like playful, mundane, quotidian things. So in so doing, it's basically saying the highest, most refined practice is interchangeable with anything and everything as a doorway into the realization of Bhairava, which is here not defined as a deity, but which is here defined as the bliss of one's own inner self experience. Anta sva anubhavananda iti Bhairavaha. This nirvikalpa gochara, a field free of all thought concepts. And so allowing the world to open you up to that spaciousness, and allowing that spaciousness to inhere in and through every experience that you have with the world, that's the goal of the Vijnana Bhairava. And that theology, the whole Vijnana Bhairava understanding of God, which is premised not on the transcendent only, para, nor on the immanence, apara, but on that which is the unifying and reconciling synthesis of both, para, the transcendence, immanence, or the knowingness in which the subject and the object are mutually cohabiting. Grahaka Bedana. Yeah, and so that's exactly right, Haraji. Like the first practice in the Vijnana Bhairava in verse 24 is not really about the junction between the breath. I mean, it is. There's a part of the practice where it's like fix your mind on the Dvitaya Sthane, the 2 points where the breath ends. But it's mostly about the dynamism of the mantra Hamsa or Soham, like breathing in and hearing Sa or Ha in the breath, breathing out and hearing either Sa or Ha in the breath, and recognizing that the breath itself is performing japa. So importantly, verse 24 is not about a practice. It's not a practice regarding the junctions of breath, nor is it a practice regarding the breath. It's not a pranayama. It's a subtle noticing practice or an awareness practice. It's a recognition practice where you're just supposed to recognize that you don't need a 36 syllable mantra. Why do you need to chant Om Hlim Bagla Mukhi Sarvadushtana Machambukam Padam Sambhaya Jivam Ki Lai Buddhi Vinashaya Hlim Om Swaha. Like, you can chant that's great, but also you could just breathe. It's basically like just take it easy and breathe. Just breathe. And notice that the experience of breathing, whether at the junction or during the breath, see, this is an important point. It's not just the junction, nor the movement of the breath. It's the whole thing together. The exhale, urdve prano hyadho jive, visargatma para ucharet, like ucharet, the articulation, the mantra of the goddess Para, the transcendent mantra is not Om Hlim Bagala Mukhi. It's not this or that. It's rather just this moment and the immediate felt sense of your being, which is mediated through your experience of breathing. It's as simple as that. It's as easeful as that. And that's why the text can be so difficult, because it's the simple things that are difficult, actually. So the text is difficult because a lot of people try to practice it, but they don't have the subtlety to work on the level of Shambhava Upaya. So instead, they default, as it were, to Shakta Upaya, which is to read the text in a philosophical way, which is what we tend to do. On Thursday nights, we tend to do it in a Shakta Upaya sense, where we philosophically reason out what's being said in the hopes that it opens us up to the very subtle non-practice practice that is called Shambhava Upaya. But what Hariji, what you're suggesting here is on the level of Anava Upaya, which I think is what we, most of us, all of us in this room, I think, me especially, benefit the most from. Anava Upaya is not just a philosophical inquiry, nor is it some subtle awareness technique or recognition technique. It's a practice. It's a practice with like practical instructions that you can apply. So saying focus on the junction of the breath, that's not arguably what Vijnana Bhairava is ultimately teaching, but it's not what it's teaching. You know, like you can do that. But to do that might miss the point of the text. It's not excluded from the teaching of Bhairava that, you know, you can do this and you can do that, you can close your nose in this way. Like there are these sort of practical, body-based, breath-based sort of instructions. Yeah, Harry. And like they're not necessarily the lowest, it's just maybe a different modality. So if we're looking for Anavopaya, meaning for like practical things that we can do, the traditional tantras, the typical tantras are like full of them. Right, you get so many things like offer this kind of flower at this time and use this mantra, put your hands like this, use this mudra, you know, contemplate this thought or visualize this image while you do X and Y and Z. And like all that stuff is called Anava-upaya. The Vijnana Bhairava, I thought it would be cool to study it alongside an Anava-upaya Tantra, like alongside a traditional ritual manual, because it does offer something subtler. And I thought it would be a nice foil. So Thursday night, my goal was to do the Padati and the Vijnana Bhairava back to back. And God willing, like this coming Thursday, we can return to that. But Friday morning, which is mostly because Nitya Leela bullies me into having this class. No, I'm kidding. She bullies me with love, which is the real way you can ensnare somebody. I'm free in almost every which way, except when Nitya Leela texts me in the morning, I'm like, I gotta. But this class is mostly because our GMT friendly friends, our UK friendly friends, like this is a good time to have a satsang, because the Monday night satsang doesn't really work. But I thought one opportunity is we could study the more Shakta Upaya type texts. For example, Abhinava Gupta's Granthas, his primers on Tantra. So then we started with, I think it was Paramarthasara in 2023, in the summer of 2023. I think we started with, I know, what is it? Yeah, exactly. Like we span different time zones, Nitya Leela, exactly. on the pursuit for global hegemony, so we can truly enact our evil upon the world. So there can be more GoFundMes. Now, it's very important that on Fridays, we consider like another kind of tantric literature, which is a supplement to what we were doing on Thursday nights. So like when we look at a padati, whether it's like a traditional padati or whether it's an atypical one like the Vijnana Bhairava, that's actually going to make fun of puja. I wouldn't say make fun, but redefine puja and like recontextualize homa and yaga and meditation, right? Doesn't it say natu dhyanam? It is not meditation to visualize a deity with arms and weapons. Sharira, kalpa, mukha, hasta. Like they're not supposed to have a body with face, mukha, or hands or whatever. Like the real meditation or true meditation is buddhim nischala, nirashraya, nirakara, or something. To keep your mind fixed, nischala, unmoving, or centered in that formless and supportless or groundless reality. We were at an Ethiopian restaurant in Seattle one night, late in the night. The only restaurant that was open at like 1 in the morning was this awesome Ethiopian restaurant in like downtown Seattle or whatever. And we're all just there at the restaurant. And Gananayaka says the funniest thing. He's like, I'm baseless. Basically, I was explaining why the word Adesh, which Agoris say to one another, to like say like, oh, it is the divine will that this should happen, Adesh. I was saying how the English word based, which all the kids are using on the internet, that works really well because Adesh technically means based. You know, so something is based, Adesh. It's good. So then I was explaining this, and then our friend Gananayaka, he was like, I'm baseless, man. I'm baseless. That's why they can never catch me, because I'm baseless. I'm just moving. I was like, oh, sounds like a Charlie XCX song. But baseless. And Nirashraya means baseless. And so this is baseless meditation. You're not focusing on anything. You're not focusing on the heart even. You're not focusing on the breath. There's nothing to like center your attention on. You just dissolve. And puja is described as dissolving into the heart space. So it's a beautiful text, awareness-centered, it's non-dual, and it's very different from most of what you find in the tantric world. And you could argue that it's a culmination of, or a complement to, or just a parallel tradition to most of what we encounter in the very maximalist, very ritualistic, very deity-oriented tantric world. So Thursday is like that. But on Friday, I thought, if we look at Paramarthasara, what you get is not a primary source per se. It's not a ritual manual, whether typical or atypical, but it's as important, if not more important than a primary source. It's a grantha, a textbook, and it helps prime you to the study of Tantra by presenting the theology and cosmology. So we know that the cosmologies and theologies of Tantra emerge from this post-scriptural exegetical tradition of secondary sources. So I thought, okay, Thursday evening, Brihaspati's day, Guru's day, we're going to study the primary sources. That's kind of our main commitment in our community. But then Friday, we'll study something that's no less important, if not more important than primary sources, the primers and the commentarial traditions that like surround those primary sources. So I thought Abhinava Gupta is a great starting point. He's like maybe the most influential voice. Actually, to be honest, we started with Somananda because he's my favorite, and I think also one of the most grounded. Thank you, Marlene. I'm glad you like yes. Thank you for recognizing that Somananda is indeed like the foundation of almost everything we consider to be really valuable in non-dual Shaivism, and he's radical. He's radical in a way I think that the modern academics have not really like recognized, because he might be more of a pantheist than a panentheist. Like it's quite clear that Utpala Deva takes his guru's philosophy in a different direction, not necessarily like transgressing it. He just includes things that Somananda would exclude. And more importantly, he has a way of like presenting a panentheism that is inclusive and far-reaching, but slightly different from Somananda's radical pantheism. And so we spent a whole summer, I think it was 2024, the summer of 2024. I was in Europe at that time. Most of the lectures I think we were doing in Zurich and Frankfurt. Vijay's phone got stolen on the train in a place called Foxgraben, which I thought was great. We were just in Germany and passing through Foxgraben, and I'm like, yeah, I guess the fox be grabbing in Foxgraben. It was funny. But we were in Europe, and we were visiting Jayanti and Jayanta in Zurich. We were staying in Amsterdam that time. And it was just really wonderful to do like a Somananda deep dive. And then, was that 2025? It could have actually been 2025, not 2024. But like having learned some Somananda, I think we only did like a cursory examination of his Shiva Drishti. We didn't do it verse by verse. We just presented the whole thing as a philosophy. Having looked at Somananda for a little bit, I thought we'll focus on Abhinava, and Paramarthasara was a great choice. But then I got inspired, and I was like, okay, no, I want something a little more hardcore, like more like pure Shakta, non-dual philosophy. Because Abhinava Gupta, one thing that's great about him is he knows how to engage new audiences. And the Paramarthasara is like the perfect example of like perfect pedagogy, because he uses words like Bhagavan, he uses words that like yogis and Vedantists and Vaishnavas are all going to be familiar with, and then he like, masterful teacher that he is, like kind of co-opts those words and redirects the meaning of those words towards a more Shakta, non-dual understanding. Like for example, in the first opening teaching in verse 4, he just gives you the Kali Yantra, but you would never know that he's doing it. He just talks about these eggs, andas. Now, he's saying egg, anda, but what he really means to say is what? Like, if he could just speak to an inner circle, an audience of initiated tantrics, to his own disciples, if he wasn't being as PR-oriented or as public-facing as he was in the Paramarthasara, what do you think he would have used instead of the word anda for the point that he was trying to make in verse 4 and verse 5? Any thoughts? Like, anda means egg, right? And he's talking about the 4 or 5 eggs. Yeah, he would have used something like yoni, or probably something like vaktra. Vaktra is even more tantric than yoni, because vaktra means mouth. And the yoni here is described not as a generative organ. Exactly, Nikla Devi. It's not a generative organ only. It's not just the janmagra. Nor is it an organ that receives. You know, see, like, it's a kind of like non-Shakta way of thinking of the yoni, that it's something that like receives and is penetrated by the lingam. It's actually the opposite. The yoni has BDE. The yoni is a vaktra in that it ejects, it emits. So the generative organ here is that it creates, right? Vaktra as in vagina, like the word vagina from vak, right? Like vak, like voce, vak. So vak means word, and vaktra, tra like yantra, like mantra, like tantra, tra means device. So vaktra means device for the word. So the yoni then is not a receptive organ of silence and reception. It's rather an emitting organ, like the mouth, of expression and creation and potency. So anda means egg. It has the same connotation of like garbha griha, like garbha as in womb, right? So garbha, which is procreative or creative, and yoni, which is also receptive, procreative, creative, like that. The word vaktra, yoni, garbha. Obviously, Abhinava Gupta can't use these words because he's speaking to a public audience. So instead, he's going to say anda, egg, but he presents 5 of them. There are 5 andas, and these 5 andas, of course, mirror the 5 kalas of the kala tattva bhuvana side of the Shad Advan. You know, there's like word, and then there's space, or like there's time and space. And so language is governing time, and there are these realms that govern space. And so the Shad Advan is the hexagram of reality, the 6 points of the experience of the embodied world. And so one aspect of that is the 5 kalas, the 5 realms of art, or it's hard to describe. This is all very like profound tantric cosmology, but he begins with this. But the way he presents the 5 kalas, like the 5 powers or the 5 acts of God, that triplicity of 5s, which is 15 altogether, he presents as 5 triangles, but he just calls them andas. And it's left to us, we who are initiates and in that closed circle, to realize that he's talking about the 5 downward pointing triangles, and he's actually just building a Kali Yantra first. So what Abhinava Gupta is doing in the Paramarthasara, I'm like, okay, this is beyond me actually. It's just so brilliant that I think I'm going to give myself like 5 more years before I come back to this text, because he's presenting Shakta Tantras, presenting some of the most radical non-dual ideas in ways that are so masterful that I feel humbled just touching that text. And I'm like, okay, I thought this was going to be an easy, grounded, like introductory text, and then the more I studied it, I realized like, fuck, it's the simplest, most grounded, most introductory things that are the deepest and more far-reaching. So I backed the fuck out, and I just bowed out, and I was like, okay, I'm going to chill on the Paramarthasara. Let's look at something that's more closed, but more obviously Shakta. And so I thought a good place to go would be the Mahatma Manjari. Now, this was not an idea of mine. It just showed up in my mail one day mysteriously. And this is a Professor Satya Prakash Singh, and he's translating Swami. He calls him Swami. I'm not sure that he was, a monastic in the Shankara Dashnami. But Professor Satya Prakash Singh, who might have sent me this book actually. It could have been a Varanasi professor who I met, and then I don't know. I forget exactly who this person is, but it's called the Maheshwarananda Mahatma Manjari, English translation with Sanskrit text. Now, I had intended to translate this some time ago, or at least some of this, in order to teach it, because it's really beautiful and really profound, but it's almost like it kind of forced my hand. This showed up, and I looked through it, and I was like, I would translate this so differently. But then I was like, wait, why don't I just do like a loose live translation and just read you some of the English that is in this book? Because it's really not bad. It's good. I have many disagreements with the introduction. I feel like there's a lot of points here that I tried to clarify in my first few lectures on the text some time ago. But I was like, oh, okay, this just showed up at my door. Let's do this. And then Nitya Leela, who, as you know, is my, like, holding me captive. I'm her MK Ultra agent or something. And then she was like, yeah, I had this experience. It confirmed that we should be studying this text. And I'm like, because she's my boss, I'm like, yeah, okay, we're going to be studying this text now. So this is what I decided to pivot to. And we looked at it for a few weeks, I think. We just did a few verses. And there's some things in the Mahatma Manjari that are so crucial for right now. Because these are conversations that we as a wider Tantric community need to have about what makes an idea valid and legitimate in the eyes of Tantra. I was saying last night that every community is going to have a different standard of care. So, for example, if somebody shows up to my house and they are, quote-unquote, by the diagnosis of Western science, medically unstable, the question is whether or not we as a mandir should let them enter. And more importantly, should we let them attend retreats? So much of the internet controversy that has happened recently is about that standard of care, and whether or not we should be held to standards of care that are different from the ones we currently have. So we felt very empowered in inviting a person into our home and in bringing them to the retreat, and more importantly, when they chose to leave, which was harshly criticized, we let them leave. The question was, should we have let them leave? That's a standard of care. And that standard of care is premised on our view of institutions and the role that allopathic psychiatric medication can play, and whether that's complementing or inhibiting tantric traditional modalities. And our view has always been that they are complementing one another, they're not mutually exclusive. As non-dualists, we don't say one is better or worse than the other, and both can be done together, as it were. That being said, though, and this is very important, it comes down to a question of to what extent does personal choice and personal sovereignty matter to the community? So if the entire group decides that someone shouldn't be there, do we kick that person out? When do we kick a person out, and when do we allow them to come in? That's a question of what choices can a person make, and how can we adjudicate that choice against all the choices that other people make, which is just a J.S. Mill standard harm principle conversation about choice and about radical free expression and whatnot, right? So having said that, the Mahatma Manjari is important because it offers some standards that can maybe inform our standards of care and our standards of participation and inclusion and exclusion. So as a tantric community, this is something that needs to be adjudicated on the whole. But what I was trying to say last night is the reason this is hard to do is because you can't speak for tantra as a whole. I'm right now referencing the Mahatma Manjari. Mahatma Manjari, I'll say more about it in just a little bit, but we've been having some classes on it recently, just because Friday mornings we're studying, not to say secondary sources, but exegetical sources maybe, or commentarial sources like Abhinavagupta. But I pivoted away from Paramarthasara. Don't fret, I'm going to go back to Paramarthasara. This is just ADD, you guys, it's okay. We can have 8 books open at the same time, and trust, we'll get through all of them. One of my favorite jokes, how many ADD kids does it take to screw on a light bulb? Let's go ride our bikes, or rather, let's study the Mahatma Manjari. Actually, let's study the Sandhya Lahari. Actually, why don't we do the Yogini Hridaya? I literally have 3 books out today, and I'm going to talk about all of them. But we're just pivoting from Abhinavagupta's Paramarthasara to the Mahatma Manjari. And I love the opening of the Mahatma Manjari because it has this conversation about standards, and they're radically different than the ones you might have heard about in the public marketplace of ideas, which is mostly on the internet, regarding contemporary Tantra. So I was making a point in last night's lecture that I think is quite important and worth repeating, that it's hard to have an objective universal standard regarding texts, regarding lineages, regarding standards of care, regarding ideas of purity and impurity, and ideas of spiritual nourishment and spiritual progress, because this is going to be very idiosyncratic as per each and every community in the imaginal space that is the tantric world. That's always been the case. Like when you look at early 10th century, 11th century tantric communities, you'll see that some of them are so like different that they didn't even want to be called tantrics. You know, it's very arguably the case that like Kaula Marga practitioners, like, you know, people who were practicing the Vijnana Bhairava, they might not like the word Tantrika. If you call them a Tantrika, they'll think you're insulting them because they'll think you mean by that they're ritualist. And a lot of these people were trying to transcend ritual. They were like laughing at ritual because all the temples were about ritual. The whole thing was ceremonials and like books and temples and churches. Even Vivekananda said these are but secondary details. These are but the kindergarten of religion. It's good to be born in a church. It's terrible to die there. Like even Vivekananda would push against the ceremonials, books and traditions and dogmas and doctrines of religion, trying to point to a deeper truth, which is transcultural or maybe post-cultural, trans-religious, or just transcendent. But here, if you say the word Tantrika in the 10th or 11th century context, maybe in Srinagar, they might not like it. So the most tantric of communities might not like the word tantric. And some of them didn't even like the word Vaidika, because if you say that they follow the Vedas, and as you know, the Tantra is very like apologetic in this way. They're like, no, we are actually the Vedas. Don't worry, you guys, we're going to give you stuff that you didn't find in the Vedas. I'm going to tell you to drink wine where the Vedas told you not to. But like, listen. This is the Vedas. This is the Kali Yuga updated Molly Riya Petharay Vedas. Like Shiva is not revealing anything new. He's just revealing the Veda. You are all Vaidikas. Chill. There's even movements like Bhaskararaya and before him Lakshmidara, Lola Lakshmidara. These are like Brahmin Pandits whose movements were premised upon Vedicizing or mainstreaming Shakta traditions that were considered extra Vedic. That's a cool word, extra Vedic. Super Vedic, I don't know, non-Vedic. But you know, while that movement happened in the like 15th and 17th centuries, mostly in South India, and while there was like a lot of tantric literature suggesting that the tantras and agamas are just the Vedas represented in the Kali Yuga, while that might have been the case, there were still members of the tantric community who didn't want to be called Vaidikas, because by that you might be implying that they follow rules that they actually laugh at. Like Abhinava Gupta's chapter 4 in the Tantra Sara, he laughs at food purity. He's like, just eat what you like. You know, you don't have to like worry about meat or leeks or mushrooms or onions or garlic, because like there is no inherent impurity in food. That's the whole burden of proof that he has in chapter 4 of the Tantra Loka. Purity and impurity is not adjudicated with regards to what Nyaya will call dravya. Dravya means substance. So different things. Mali, nice to see you hit that wine after the conversation about it. I have black coffee, Jaima, which I think they would consider an intoxicant along the likes of almost any other intoxicant. But dravya means substance, and substance is something that in Nyaya is very important. They'll say you can't have the color red without some dravya, without some substance in which redness inheres. So red is a guna. It's a quality. How can you have a quality without some substance for that quality to present itself in? So the rose that is red implies the reality of the rose, because the redness of the rose is premised upon dravya, the substantial nature of the rose. And that's what allows Nyayikas and Vaisheshikas to be realist. They present the world as real and really substantial, which is important because they're responding to Buddhists who are idealists and illusionists. So Advaita Vedantins, Buddhists, these are all people who say the world is unreal, like a dream. It's immaterial. So the Nyayikas and the Vaisheshikas, in order to present the world as substantial and real, will use arguments like this. Don't you see the color red? How can there be red without something to hold that redness? This is called dravya. Now dravya, substance, is what ultimately makes something pure or impure. So if the substance is impure, you shouldn't eat it. And if the substance is pure, then eating it will be spiritually nourishing. Now is that mala or vimala, is that impurity or lack of impurity, vimala, amala, like, is that inherent in the thing? Abhinava doesn't think so. He thinks you can eat whatever you want and drink whatever you want. The real impurity, quote unquote, and he's not going to abandon the notion of impurity altogether. He's going to say the real impurity is how you think and feel when you eat it. So it's like that proverb, it's not what goes into your mouth but what comes out that is impure. So it's kind of like you can eat meat and be the holiest person in the world, or you can be a pure vegetarian and be like the ultimate scoundrel of all time. You know, like, that's what Sri Ramakrishna implies when he says, blessed is he who eats pork, which is considered super impure. Blessed is he who eats pork and yet thinks of God day and night. And a wretch is he, though he eats the, it says havishan, which means ghee rice, the purest, lightest food. And a wretch is he who eats this pure food and all day long thinks worldly thoughts. So the point that Sri Ramakrishna is making is exactly the point that Abhinavagupta makes in chapter 4 of Tantra Sara. So you can see like there are all these like really profound arguments that would cause a person not to like it if you call them a Vaidika, because you might be implying that they follow rules that they feel like they have transcended. They might not like if you call them a Tantrika. The point I'm making with all of this is that every Tantric community is empowered by the Tantric world, and this is of course, it's been adjudicated differently at different times in history. A dear friend of mine, actually, a scholar and someone who's very deep in this tradition, reached out to me on Instagram, and it was so sweet. He said, brother, your Leela reminds me of the mighty Chakra Bhanu. And I was very touched by that because he knows a bit of Tantric history here. There was a guy in Srinagar. His name was Chakra Bhanu, and he was like a crazy, eccentric but charismatic teacher who lived in the Smashan, or at least he liked to go to the Smashan. He might have even been an aristocrat, a Kshatriya in the court of maybe, I don't know, Avantivarman or something. I forget what king was ruling at the time. But he used to drink out of a skull bowl, or at least he used to carry a staff with a skull on it. So that's how he got his name, Chakra Bhanu, like the one who wields the skull or something. So he would have these parties in the Smashan, and the king was not happy with them. Just like I imagine King James is looking out of his tower and seeing all the witches dancing around a fire, and he's like, these girls are having way too much fun, I'm frightened, let's burn them all. It's probably along those lines, but maybe not as dramatic. So Chakrabhanu was accused of hosting illegitimate, illegal gatherings in the Smashan, and he was then convicted and branded with the fox's foot. Now this is interesting because in the historical record of Srinagar, of Kashmir, the fox's foot was a brand that you would give to an embezzler, someone who was taking money without the king's consent. So it was arguably the case that people were donating to Chakrabhanu in order to have these melapas, Veera melapas, circle of heroes, a gathering of heroes. They were probably drinking, and they might have even been having orgies. Sadly, people come to my retreats expecting orgies, and I'm always disappointing them because it's just studying 3 texts at once. But maybe Chakrabhanu, who knows what he was doing, but it could have been wild and ecstatic, and they could have been drinking and having orgies. Like, nobody knows exactly what he was doing, but we just know the king didn't like it. And it could have been political, it could have been Chakrabhanu was assembling a alternate center of political authority. Who knows what happened, but it is significant that he was not branded for sexual transgression, nor was he branded for like consuming impure substances. Maybe presumably he wasn't a Brahmin. But he was branded with the fox's foot, meaning he was embezzling funds. That's kind of interesting. It tells you about what the king thought was a punishable offense and what wasn't. It was not wrong for him to gather in the Smashan or party. It was not wrong for him to consume wine if he was indeed doing that. What was wrong was allegedly he was collecting money that the king didn't like that he was collecting or something like that. But anyway, the cute thing about it is that he writes about it. So Chakrabhanu, in a very rare autobiographical moment, because it's very rare for like autobiographies or hagiographies to come out of India until like, you know, Paramahansa Yogananda or something. What he writes is so cute. He says, and Chakrabhanu, you can hear the pathos in his vocative. He says something like, Chakrabhanu is no longer allowed to do the thing that he loves to do the most, his gathering of heroes in the Smashan. Woe is me. It's a cute cat or dog or some white angel that flashed across Marlene's screen. But it's such a cute thing. So it's funny that my friend reached out to me and was like, your Leela reminds me of Chakrabhanu's, and I was touched by that. But I think it's important to point out that Chakrabhanu's community might have even offended not just the king, but other tantric communities in that area who didn't want to be associated with the cremation ground. Even Abhinavagupta tries to move his stuff away from the mortuary rites of the cremation ground dwelling Kapalikas and Kalamukas or whatever. Like, you know, Abhinava will say, you know what the real skull cup is? The cognition that you have moment to moment, filled with the wine of Samarasya, filled with the wine of the essence of reality. Drink from this skull cup and be intoxicated. Basically, he's saying, except in ritual, don't walk around naked carrying a skull cup with matted locks with like dead people's ornaments. Like, don't live in the Smashan. Like, all of that is just something that's kind of like, that was an early part of our tradition, and we want to like, you know, maybe move away from that. We're gonna like metaphorically talk about it. We're gonna think about yoginis not as spirits to be communed with in the nighttime, but as forces inherent to psychiatric conditions. Like, there are ways in which we're trying to internalize and esoterize or metaphorize those things that were taken literally by the early parts of our tradition. So it's important to point out that even in Srinagar in the 10th, 11th, 12th centuries, there are groups that are not liked by other groups. You cannot speak for Tantra as a whole because it's a dizzying, dazzling display of diversity where every community like idiosyncratically clings on to its own standards of textual legitimacy, lineage authority, and spiritual value. So I was trying to make that point last night that like there seems to be an effort in the internet to like police what texts are legit and what texts aren't, what paramparas are legit and what paramparas aren't, and which teachers should have a platform and which ones shouldn't. And I think that's a valuable conversation, actually. That's a conversation that should happen, and we should be discerning when we look at texts and lineages and teachers, and especially given that we're going to like put so much time and effort into practicing these things, thinking about these things, applying these things. Of course we should be discerning upfront. And the Mahatma Manjari is really important to me because it presents a few standards that I think are quite revolutionary. For like a 12th, 13th century, I'm sorry, for 15th, 14th, 15th century text, like this is a really cool presentation of standards. And I thought we could start with that today, just to make the point that like every community and every lineage and every tradition is valid in its own idiosyncratic conceptualization of standards, but they should all have them, and they should all be transparent about them and clear about them. So like in our community, you know that we tend to center texts first and foremost. Other communities might not do that because of a lack of Sanskrit literacy, or because of a lack of like academic sort of background, or maybe because of a lack of access to text in any way, shape or form. They might not have the Sanskrit, they might not have the background, but they also might just not have the texts, even if they have the Sanskrit and the academic background. And so it's a privilege thing. I recognize this. There's some privilege. Like I was raised in a privileged setting in which I could learn Sanskrit. I was raised in a privileged setting in which I had access to text. Many of them are incredibly expensive manuscripts that you can't just like find on the streets and in bookstores and things like that. Thankfully, things have changed a lot. And texts like this, which would have been like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars, like I have texts that are like just like that, like there's a text right there that's like at least $600, but like it's weird because it's just a little thing like that. But this little piece of Sanskrit, because it's an original manuscript, costs so much. And a lot of them are like locked up in museums. A lot of them are in academic institutions, and you have to be part of those like programs to access them. So there's a lot of institutional red tape here. There's a lot of privilege, and that's what makes texts a kind of difficult thing to orient your community around. But for better or for worse, that's kind of my focus. Like I believe in text, I believe in the peer-reviewed, corroborated tradition of like textual transmission, and I believe not just in the validity of texts as they are transmitted through history. I believe in the commentarial traditions that emerge around texts, and to engage a text and its commentarial tradition seems to me to be the most grounded and based way to approach Tantra, because it decenters the role of charismatic leaders and individuals. As a fellow charismatic individual leading a community, I think it is actually really helpful to like have the text be the authority and not the person commenting on the text. And if a person like me were to comment on a text, it should be aligned with other commentarial traditions that can then check and balance what I have to say, because a lot of what I'm going to have to say has to do with my interpretation of the text, my understanding of Sanskrit, and most importantly, my experience with the text. Which brings me to another point. Can you practice out of a text only? Like, do you need a guru in order to practice out of a text? Now, this is actually a very complicated question, because I have a guru. I had a guru when I was a child, my grandfather. But then when he passed away, I moved into a different lineage, and now I have a Sadguru, who is my heart and soul. But most of my texts don't come from my current guru. Many of them come from my grandfather, but a lot of them also don't come from my grandfather. They're texts I've acquired in my journey and my travels since. So like the question is this: can I practice a text that I was not given by my grandfather? And can I practice a text that my current guru doesn't know about or hasn't himself practiced? That's one big part of the conversation on the internet regarding like my platform and my legitimacy. There are people who are my guru bhais, people who are also initiated in the Ramakrishna Math and Mission. Like, they look to my guru and they say, I don't understand how you can be teaching Kaulachara or Vamachara when your guru is a Vedanta Acharya. He doesn't teach any of these things. Now, first of all, this is incredibly presumptuous. It argues that the person that he is publicly is who he is with me privately, and what we discuss in private is actually incredibly sacred and not something that I want to or can even, traditionally speaking, share on the internet or with others. And nor do I need to. Like, there's no need to prove anything to anybody with regards to what personal conversations happen between me and my guru. But importantly, and this is very important to me, there was a time in our culture where we wouldn't even say our guru's name. It was such a sacred thing that your guru's name and your relationship to your guru is like something like a mantra. You kept it as secret as you possibly could, and only your inner circle will know about your guru. But of course, now we live in a very different time where I'm a public figure and all my information is available, most of it anyway. And everyone knows that I am part of the Ramakrishna lineage because I tend to represent that lineage quite a lot. I have Thakur and Ma over there, and I talk about Swami Vivekananda. We study Vivekananda, Brahmananda. My guru is very important to me, and I'm always talking about Swami Brahmananda and Swami Shankarananda, and of course I offer a lot of anecdotes about my Guru Deva. And some of you who come to visit me here in LA, one of the first things I like to do is to take you and introduce you to my guru, and then we like have lunch and we have a great time. And so it's like it's no mystery, and it's a matter of public debate that my guru is this particular individual who has a position of authority in a particular lineage which I am a part of. But importantly, that lineage does not publicly endorse Vamachara or Kaulachara. So this is a very complicated and confusing place to be, because if I teach things that my guru not only won't teach, but publicly won't endorse, the question then becomes, what do we say about legitimacy and validity? Like, am I supposed to only teach what my guru teaches? And if that's the case, then I should only stick to Shankara's commentaries of Vedanta. Like, I should stick to the Upanishads, Upanishad Pramana, Vedanta Nama. Vedanta is the study of the Upanishads. So I should only teach Vedanta along the lines of Shankaracharya, which is what the Ramakrishna Math and Mission mainly does. Of course, with an emphasis on Vivekananda's like take. So I should just teach Vivekananda. However, I've tried to do that, and when I teach Vivekananda, you've all been to my Raja Yoga classes, I think some of you at least have, you'll see that I immediately take it into a Shaiva place. And why do I do that? Because the word Raja Yoga is a Shaiva word from the 2nd century AD that has nothing to do with the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Like, you know, like, where in the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali is there the word Raja Yoga? The use of the serpent as a symbol for Raja Yoga in the Ramakrishna Math and Mission logo is an important point. The Yoga Sutra is not about Kundalini. The yoga tradition is not interested in chakras or Kundalini or any of these Shaiva Tantric ideas, whereas Vivekananda is. He talks about those, and he links them to anatomical things like the afferent and efferent nervous systems and whatnot. So like Vivekananda's take on Raja Yoga is something that's very difficult to do from within any one lineage because of how diverse a mind he is. Vivekananda and Ramakrishna, like Ramakrishna, Vivekananda is so vast that anybody who approaches will find in him something that suits their proclivities and predispositions. Now, having been born in the Shaiva Siddhanta world, the southern Indian Sri Vidya Shaiva Siddhanta world that I was born into, the question then becomes, like, if my Vedanta guru is not teaching this stuff, and if the way to teach Vivekananda is so varied from one teacher to another or one lineage to another, won't I just naturally default to my Shaiva Siddhanta stuff? Now, the problem with that also is when I teach the Raurava Agama, like Shiva Jnana Bodha or something like that, if I teach Tirumular, Tirumantiram, stuff like that, the problem with that is it's also going to be informed by experiences that I've had and texts that I've encountered and practiced with after my grandfather and after my first 18 or 19 years growing up in that household. So now I'm in this liminal space where I'm working with texts and practicing out of texts and experiencing things that I want to share from these texts that were not given to me by my Vedanta guru nor by my grandfather, and that I, on my own, have worked through and practiced. So the question becomes, can you practice text without a guru? I actually don't know the answer because I have a guru. I have 2 gurus, and I don't know if that is all it took. Just being initiated by gurus and having a lineage, maybe that has empowered me and grounded me, or at least given me some kind of subconscious confidence to practice with these texts on my own, or at least it's given me a basis, like a kind of fluency to encounter and wholesomely work with text. Maybe if I never had any gurus, if I never had any human authorities or lineages, if I was just on my own and just studying text, I don't know what would have happened, because it's not my experience. It would be kind of weird for me to say that it's going to be fine if you just study text and just do whatever you want based on the text without a guru, because that's not my experience. I had gurus, but I did not practice a lot of these texts with my gurus. That's an important point. I would tell my gurus about them. I would share a lot of what I discovered through the text with my gurus, but my gurus had either never encountered those texts themselves nor practiced out of them, and were just there for me to share and in some cases even teach. So it's a really interesting thing. It's an interesting thing to practice from a text. So here Sonu is asking, what do you mean by practice with text? I mean, let's say you have a padati, right? You just come across a padati, it's from the 18th century, and it's a manual, a ritual manual for propitiating a certain kind of deity, maybe Smashana Kali or something like that. Now, you might have gotten the text from your guru, and if you did, that's very good, because then your guru will ground you with their experience of the text. So they will explain the text to you. They'll walk you through the procedure. They might even do the procedure with you. You can watch them do it, and then they'll demonstrate it, and then they'll do it with you, and then they'll supervise you while you do it, and then whatever results and outcomes happen as a result of the practice, they're there to like catch you. That's the best case scenario, right? The best case scenario is you have a guru who gives you a text that your guru himself or herself or themselves has practiced, right? That's the best case scenario. What would happen though if you didn't have a guru but you did have a text? So this is the opposite case. So you don't have a guru but you have a text, and then you just do the text, meaning to answer Sona's question here in the chat, meaning you just like know Sanskrit, which is the case for me, and therefore you can read the primary source, and more importantly, maybe you've had a background in Tantra, which is what my upbringing gave me, enough to be able to discern what the elliptical Sandhya Bhasha stuff is doing. Maybe also you have like an academic ability to compare exegetical materials to other commentarial traditions, whatnot. So like you just work it out on your own to the best of your ability using sattarka, your intellect, and then based on that, you do the practice in the text. Based on your understanding of the text, you just do the ritual. Okay, you have no guru, no one has done this before you, you just have a text, and so you have no way of like asking anyone for help or watching anyone do this or like having someone watch over you do it, and you have nothing but yourself to blame and hold responsible for when it comes to the results and outcomes of the text. Now, I am in many cases in neither camp, right? There have been many times when my guru has given me a text, and there have been many texts that I've studied that my guru has not given me, but never have I been without a guru. Like, this is the point I want to make right now. Like, never have I been without a guru in spiritual life, and never have I been without a living human guru that I could go to when I needed. Even if that guru did not give me the text, did not maybe even authorize me to practice the text. And I'm lucky, you guys. I've always had like gurus that are so liberal and so like permissive. Do you know, I have this strategy where if I ask my guru something and my guru's like, no, I'll ask him again tomorrow. You know, maybe you guys like you might have a problem with that, but if I really love a text and if I really want to practice the text and I go and ask my guru if I can practice the text, I'm very lucky in that I have the kind of guru who will 9 out of 10 times say yes. Like, he just empowers my personal choice. I'm lucky in that way. I don't have a strict authoritarian guru that like tells me what I can or cannot eat, what I can or cannot do. That's just my style, and I'm not going to do well with a guru who like doesn't respect my will and autonomy. But I also need guidance. I also need someone older than me who's done this longer than me, maybe, who can be an authority to me, who I trust and respect and revere. And maybe there's some like mystical shit going on. I mean, God forbid that God is real. God forbid that there's some magic in Tantra. And God forbid that Parampara provides some magical support that we cannot really directly speak to, but only imply. So I don't know, maybe that's true too. Maybe there's like a Parampara, like lineage protection that's happening magically that grounds me more than just the psychological like relationship I have with my gurus. So a big part of the like internet debate around my legitimacy as a teacher is this. I have guru bhais on my Ramakrishna side who have never been to my like hometown. They've never come back home with me. They've not been to India with me. They've not met my grandparents. They don't know my family lineage, my Malayali side. They don't know the Bhagavati, like Kerala, Amman worship side. They've not come to the Shaiva Siddhanta world in South India. They don't know like the Sri Vidya influence. I mean, you know, I had a Sri Chakra growing up. They might have seen me perform Shiva Linga pujas, and they're like, their opinion of Shaiva Siddhanta is that's what it is. It's Tirumantiram, it's Tirumular, it's Tirumurai, it's just the Shiva Lingam, it's the Sri Rudram, like it's just very Vedic kind of oriented stuff. Like that's their opinion of Shaiva Siddhanta. So my Guru Bhais in the Ramakrishna mission, some of them are like, he's doing things that our Guru and his Guru doesn't teach, would not teach, and publicly doesn't endorse. That's a problem. Is he stepping outside of the lineage? Now, again, I'm not going to divulge any personal conversations I had with my Guru. It's enough for me to say that almost everything, not everything, but almost everything I've done in my spiritual life since 2022 at least, I've done with the knowledge of my Guru. So I told my Guru that I was doing these things, and that isn't to say that he's signing off on them. A lot of times he warned me. He was like, okay, this is going to happen if you do this. Like once he even straight up told me that all your loved ones are either going to leave you or die if you perform this parati. I did the parati. Because that's just the kind of person that I am. I'm kind of reckless in that way, where if I love a text and I want to practice from a text, I'm going to do it, come hell or high water. But I have gurus. So my gurus are the kinds of gurus who have empowered me in my own personal journey, but who have also been there for me, at least in the capacity of like a human that I could relate some of these experiences to. So I don't know what it's like to practice out of a text without a guru. And I also don't know what it's like to have a guru that is not liberal and like open to me trying my own stuff. And I definitely know what it's like to practice based on a text that was not given to me by my guru, not taught to me by my guru, and maybe even unknown to my guru. Like the Maharta Manjari. My grandfather did not study this text, though he knew about it and he would like speak about it. He never himself practiced it or like did anything regarding it. But I did, and I love it. And there are padathis like crazy padathis that I've done that I've gotten results from that I love. So now the question, was it illegitimate for me to study books that my guru did not give me? Was it illegitimate for me then to, based on my studies and my understanding of those texts, was it illegitimate for me then to practice out of those books? Maybe. But full disclosure, I did. I did, and I loved it because I got so much out of the text that I started to realize that Shiva is the guru, and Shiva's vak, the guru's words, are immortalized in the tantras. And by accessing the primary sources, you access perhaps everything that you need in order to do a wholesome inquiry into the tantras. And like that's going to be based on your own intuition, your own academic rigor, your own like intellectual prowess, your own Sanskrit fluency, and your own capacity as a sadhaka. Like, will you actually be able to do the things? And when you get the results, as you will, since these are scientific manuals, it's like trying to learn rocket science by yourself through a textbook. A lot of it can feel like that. If something blows up in your laboratory and you die, are you open to that? I am. And maybe not everyone is. So a lot of people need more hand-holding. They need gurus who will give them text, who will read the text with them, who will practice for them and demonstrate to them, and practice with them and watch over them, and then be there for the results. Like, that's valid, you know. If you need that kind of guru who is like going to be there with you every step of the way and like really like monitoring you and guiding you every step of the way, then such gurus do exist, and that would probably be the kind of guru that would be best for you. That's not going to work for me because I tend to trust my own academic rigor, my own intellectual inquiry, and my own intellectual prowess, and I tend to trust my own capacity as a sadhaka. And I'm the kind of person that likes to take responsibility for what happens in spiritual life and not outsource that responsibility to institutions or people. You can even argue that that's Vira Bhava. So in the Tantric world, we have languaging around this. There's something called Pashu Bhava. This is not to be pejorative, but a Pashu Bhava type practitioner needs very strict rules about diet and about conduct. They need very clear instructions and very like clear guidance. So a lot of the people that have a problem with me and my approach, they're valid for having a problem actually, because what they're sensing is a bhava that doesn't match their own. They're interested in a pashu bhava type sadhana, and for the vast majority of people, that's the kind of bhava that's going to be spiritually nourishing. You know, you're going to look for spiritual authority in institutions and in people, and by God, many of those institutions and many of those people are worthy of the authority that you invest them with. Like, I know we've had our hang-ups with human teachers and we've had our hang-ups with institutions, but it's not true of every institution that they're corrupt and problematic. It's not true of every guru that they're like cult-like personalities that will take all of your money and abuse you. Like, there are many great gurus, like my Vedanta guru, like the Vedanta Society. Like, a lot of these institutions are legit and based, and if you are a Pashubhava type practitioner and you want strong guidance and you want hand-holding, that's there for you. I don't though. Like, I need a guru who maybe can be a good Pashubhava guru to some others, but has to be a Vira Bhava guru to me. I've explicitly been told by my guru privately, and again, this is not something I feel like I need to divulge. I don't owe anybody an explanation, but it's still valuable to say. My guru himself said to me that Vira Bhava is legit and valid, but he warned me that people won't be able to understand it and I should be private. My guru was very insistent upon me being as private as I could about some of these areas of my sadhana and my experience, and I've done the opposite. I've been public and vocal, and I've been inspired to share these things, which my guru also knows and doesn't endorse but acknowledges. And so it's important to point out that I might just be a Vira Bhava type practitioner, meaning I don't need as much guidance or handholding, and I am willing to study the text by myself. But I'm not so Vira Bhava, I think, that I would do it without a guru whatsoever. You know? It's just not my experience to not have a guru. I've always had a guru my whole life. But you know, maybe in an alternate universe where I had no guru, living spiritual teacher, maybe I would be that Vira Bhava. Maybe I would just do these texts. And I like to think that I would. And therefore, I'm going to ask this question again. Is it okay to practice texts that your guru doesn't know about, that your guru has not themselves practiced, that your guru maybe doesn't even endorse? And further, is it possible and acceptable to practice text when you don't have a guru at all? right? Like, that's the question I just want to ask and open to the audience. Like, let's go into a Q&A in just a bit, and just put this question out there. Like, what do you think? Like, what do you guys think? Like, I want to take a feel. I mean, I know I'm preaching to the Kaula choir here, and I'll come to you guys in a little bit. Let me just finish my Pravarchana for a bit. But, like, I want to know, like, I just want to put this out there. Like, what do you guys think? Would you practice the text? And by practice, I mean do the rituals that the text describes, and then take responsibility for the results and outcomes? Like, would you be willing to practice the text based on just the text and just your academic integrity, just your Sanskrit fluency, and just your own understanding of what the text is telling you to do? And by the way, the disclaimer here is that a lot of these texts are couched, like you just saw a moment ago, in very elliptical language, in very alchemical languages. Therefore, it's going to be like something that is liable to, you're susceptible to error here. The margin of error is infinite. So you could get it wrong. And if you get the procedure wrong, the results might not be something you can wholly account for or that anybody can protect you from. Would you be willing to lose life and limb? Would you be willing to go, quote unquote, crazy in the name of spiritual practice? Unfortunately, I'm the kind of person that will try everything, and I'm not afraid. I like, I will, like, for instance, I'm at the Dhuni, and maybe this is something that my PR team will tell me not to have much. So I think that's like that story that I just told, which shouldn't be on record. I think that's like a demonstration of like Vira Bhava. It's just I'm not afraid of those experiences, maybe because of some grounding that I had when I was younger that some other people might not have had. So then I'm going to argue that this is another matter of privilege. I was privileged to learn Sanskrit. I was privileged to grow up in a comfortable household where my parents valued learning. And I was privileged then to have access not only to the best academic institutions, but also private tutors and whatnot, but also I had access to texts, which I recognize that a lot of people don't have, and nor do they have the academic background, even if they did have access to the text, to value them the way I do. And then I'm also going to acknowledge that I had the privilege of maybe starting when I was very young and having a lot of hatha yoga and a lot of meditative training. I was vegetarian for like a long time, not eating onions and garlic. Maybe that helped. I don't know, because again, my life experience has always been to have a guru, and my life experience is one where from age 16 to like 23, I was practicing in a very Brahmanical, very like Dakshinachara way, as some of my earlier lectures in 2022, 2023 will demonstrate. Because I only ever lecture from my own experience, and from 2020 and 2023, I was very much in this like Advaita Vedanta, Dakshinachara kind of grounded thing. But then, Ma Kali ruined my life, right? Like then I started having experiences that started moving me left, as it were. And that happened to people like Abhinavagupta, Kshema Raja. There were a lot of Shaivas whose fathers, Abhinavagupta mind you, his father Narasingha Gupta, probably gave him the kind of training that I would have gotten, that most Shaivas would have gotten throughout history. I got the kind of training from my grandfather that likely Abhinavagupta got from his father Narasingha Gupta. But that didn't stop Abhinavagupta from seeking as many as maybe 16 other gurus, and not only that, from practicing texts with those gurus and maybe even on his own. So again, I'll place the question before you. Maybe it's a Vira Bhava versus Pashu Bhava thing, I don't know. But the question is this: would you be comfortable practicing a text that your guru doesn't know about, that your guru has not themselves practiced, and that your guru might even explicitly or implicitly not endorse? Would you feel comfortable doing that? And more importantly, would you feel comfortable practicing a text without a living guru who you could go to for checks and balances and for grounding, given that the results might be unpredictable? And most importantly, do you trust your own academic rigor, your own intellectual prowess? Do you trust your Sanskrit enough to be able to access a primary source or a secondary source and understand it in the best possible light, given the susceptibility that we all have to misreading elliptical things? Cool question, right? And it's an open question. It's just a question for the internet, because I think that's the main fear that people have regarding my legitimacy. Like my guru bhais on the Ramakrishna side, they're like, oh my god, like you're doing texts that our guru would not know about or ever endorse, and that maybe Ramakrishna even spoke out against. I disagree with that. I think a lot of people that are speaking for Ramakrishna have not themselves read the Katamrita, nor have they finished Swamiji's 9 volumes, nor have they read the letters of Swami Vivekananda. Like, it breaks my heart to see people like speak out for a lineage, having never themselves, I think, really grounded themselves in the literature. So I would then implore my friends in the Ramakrishna lineage to ask these questions. They are good questions, and I think your challenge is valid, and I want to like respond to it as best as I can. I think you should read the literature, but also I recognize that we all are going to read the literature based on our own understanding. We're going to bring in a confirmation bias based on our own life experience. And my experience has meant that when I read Vivekananda and when I read Ramakrishna, I read into Vivekananda and I read into Ramakrishna a Kaulachara and Vamachara flavor. And you, when you read Vivekananda and Ramakrishna, which you should do first before engaging in such discussions about lineage, I think you're going to bring into it your Protestant background also. And that's valid. I think Vivekananda and Ramakrishna are vast enough to be able to hold all of us. The question about lineage becomes important when we consider whether or not texts can stand on their own quote-unquote 4 feet. The padas, the 4 padas, we talk about texts like cows. So the 4 padas, jnana, philosophy, yoga, kriya, and charya. These 4 padas, or yantra, mantra, tantra, and charya. These 4 padas, feet of the text, are they enough? Like, is a text enough unto itself? Like, that's the question I just want to put out into the public. So texts that we're going to study now, the Yogini Hridaya, the Maharta Manjari, the Saundarya Lahari, I never studied them directly with my grandfather, nor did I study them with my guru, though I've had conversations with my guru about these, and more importantly, my guru did in one case tell me to teach this text to somebody. Basically, somebody was asking my guru for Sri Vidya knowledge. My guru was like, yeah, like that's not really my field, and then referred me. Like, that's happened. And so the question then is, does my guru endorse this? Maybe in a private context, my guru endorses me teaching the Yogini Hridaya based on my Shaiva background, but he will not publicly, as a minister of the Vedanta Society of Southern California, he will not endorse this because that's not the RKM standard. So that's the first question I want to ask about text. I'm now going to posit something. I think in the modern era, in the contemporary marketplace of ideas, most of that is happening on the internet. I think texts are really great. I think most of these are becoming free and available on the internet. Like, there's access to them like never before. And I think, friends, there's an opportunity here for us to recognize that Lord Shiva is the guru, that in the Tantric world, Parameshwara, Parameshwari, they are the beginning of the lineage. And their words, friends, are recorded and transmitted textually throughout history. And so a text like the Maharta Manjari is, to me, of very high authority. So high that you, I think, without a guru even, can beneficially practice with it. So I want to start today with the Maharta Manjari and just read you some of the English translations from Professor Satya Prakash Singh, just with regards to this like Guru Yoga stuff, and with regards to like parampara and textual transmission, because I think it might help ground in a textual source a lot of the discussions we've been having in the past month or so. But yeah, I think texts are great. And as far as our lineage is concerned, as far as our community is concerned, I'm going to always center the text. I'm going to center primary and secondary sources and the commentarial traditions around those as the first and foremost place that we look for validity and authority. The next thing I'm going to say is we're going to use Vivekananda standard. And Vivekananda standard is, if an idea empowers you, if it nourishes you, if it strengthens you, hold on to it. Vivekananda would be even more dramatic. He'll say, go down to hell even for it. You know, and that's what I feel like I've been doing these past few months, like at least for the last year, to learn these texts, and not only to like study them and practice them on my own with regards to my failed marriage. It was difficult to practice these texts in my household because like I had a partner who didn't feel like this was valid or legitimate because they had a different and perfectly valid bhava. But what to say then of teaching these texts? You know, having practiced them for some time, now teaching them, it feels like, oh my God, it's like going down into hell for something that I think is worth going into hell for. I love these ideas. And I love these ideas in and of themselves without any discussion of the legitimacy of text or the legitimacy of lineages. So I want to share ideas that I think are really great. And the Maharta Manjari is what I'm going to start with today. And then I'm going to move on to the other two texts and open the floor. But the Maharta Manjari opens with a discussion. And I think if you use Vivekananda, it's very easy. You don't need to get wrapped up in the politics of institutions, lineages, or Shastra Vatara, the logic of a text. You can just go straight to the idea. And you can ask yourself, is this empowering? And if it is, go down to hell even for it. And if it's not, cast it aside and wait for something better. You know, like, it doesn't, it's, I guess I could put it this way, it's not that deep, right? Like, you know, it's like, it's not that big of a deal. It's like, are these ideas cool or not? If you like them, cool, practice them. And can you practice them without a guru? Up to you. I think you are a free individual and well within your rights to come to these conclusions for yourself. So using those two standards then, in our community, we premise texts and we cite texts and we base everything, Adesh, on texts. Yeah, I think, you know what, you're right. I think I should just do that. I should just convert to Islam. I should accept Prophet Muhammad, SAW, as the seal of the prophets. This tantric stuff is clearly not for me yet, right? Like, that's what I've learned. I'm like, I get it. I get why Agoras and Kapalikas have left well and good alone and stayed in the smashan and not tried to teach anybody anything. But I don't know. I love this stuff. I'm going to teach this stuff. And primarily on Thursday evenings and on Friday mornings, I want to teach this stuff with as much reference to the text as is humanly possible. Because I believe in them. I believe in the text. And so the first text I want to present you is the Mahatma Manjari. Because it gives so much of that Shakta non-dual theology, which informs things like Somananda. I mean, okay, Somananda was earlier. But like Somananda... And Somananda references the Vijnana Bhairava, which is really interesting, which argues that the Vijnana Bhairava was earlier than Somananda. So maybe the Vijnana Bhairava is like 8th, 9th century AD. Somananda maybe is around the same time. So he might have been a contemporary of Keuravati or something. Gyanetranatha even maybe. But then after Vijnana Bhairava, after Svabodhodaya Manjari, after Somananda, we have texts like this, the Mahatma Manjari. And if nothing else, this text to me is like the OG textbook Shakta non-dual text. So I thought it would be really cool to pivot and practice this. No, I mean, like, that's the problem. My whole problem is that Kali is real. I kind of wish she wasn't. I kind of wish I didn't have all the experiences I had practicing out of Vama and Kaula Paratis, because then I wouldn't be so inspired to teach them. I wouldn't be so enlivened and interested if it wasn't real. And so, my God, if I had one prayer, Ma, it would be this, that you aren't real, that your texts don't work, and that people practicing on their own with these texts don't actually get results. Because I'm fucked. I'm fucked because Kali is real. She fucks me in the ass every single fucking day. I'm fucked because the texts are real, and what they prescribe is a procedurally, like, guaranteed pathway to having some results. And I'm fucked because those results are so nourishing, so inspiring, so beautiful, that I can't help but want to share them with anyone and everyone who is interested. Because I can't imagine just enjoying all of this to myself. You know, so that's why I'm fucked, because nobody wants it. Nobody wants me to talk about Kali or present the ideas. Nobody wants me to talk about Kaulachara, Vamachara, and I'm like, fuck you then, Ma. Fuck you, because I love you and I love talking about you, and everybody seems to hate you and hate what you're about and hate what you have taught me that you're about. And so, yeah, fuck that bitch, honestly. She's ruined my life by giving me all the freedom and joy and fulfillment that I could have ever wanted. Yeah, Kali is real. That's my warning, right? Kali is real. You know? Yeah, hey, Apasmara, come stay with me for a week. Like, when the cops showed up yesterday, that was so funny. Apasmara is saying, like, aren't you saying that from your comfortable home in Los Angeles? Please come. Just come and spend 1 week with me. Those of you who have, the people who come and smack you, the people who come with weapons, the stalkers, the cops, like, oh my God, never a dull day. I literally almost called Netflix. I kid you not. I opened my phone, Googled Netflix, I was looking for a number, and I was going to call them and be like, hey, listen, I have a pitch. Yes, Kali is real. I know, right? Apparently I emptied out bank accounts, but where the fuck is my GoFundMe? Where the fuck is my money? I had to borrow money for rent again. What the fuck? Anyway. I almost went to Kashi, by the way. Like a few months ago. I almost just fucked off, because I was like, fuck the Kali Yuga. Fuck the Western world. I'm done doing all of this. I'm going to be so happy just sitting in Kashi. Bringideva tried to take the Kashi out too. So I'm just going to go die in Kashi. I have medical issues. I'm just going to go sit there and like die. Like, I tried that. I was like, I'm just going to go to Kashi. And then someone sent me in the mail like boxes upon boxes upon boxes of my favorite American cereal called Kashi Golin. This lecture brought to you by. No, seriously, Kashi Golin. You guys should endorse me and sponsor me. Like, clearly I could use the funds. And also, your cereal is fucking tight. I would rep your cereal. It's good cereal. It's like chocolate, kind of not so sweet, like good cereal. Anyway, somebody sent me boxes upon boxes upon boxes of this Kashi Golin cereal, and the message, and Assamese black tea, and the message was, don't go to Kashi, you have Kashi at home. And then I wept and wept and wept and thought about all my friends here. I thought about our community here, and I was like, you know, why should I give up and run away? Like, clearly this stuff has value for some people. It definitely has value for me. I love sharing it, and I wouldn't stop sharing it. I would just prefer to share it in a more private setting on the ghats, the way we've always been sharing it. But then, just the day before leaving, like, I just stood up the flight. Like, that day when I was going to go to Kashi, I just decided, like, you know, maybe I'll stay here for as long as I can until they deport me, and then I'll go to Kashi, or send you a postcard from El Salvador or something like that. But you guys, just come and stay with me for a week. Is Apsara still here? Probably. Yeah, okay. Apasmara, just come. It's good. You'll see. No, there's no two ways about it. Like, Kali is real, and she will ruin our lives. Thank God. Thank God. Ram Prasad says, is this what I get for loving you, mother? All I have now is a begging bowl and loincloth. You know, it's like, I have more intimacy now with people than ever before, but all my communities have dissolved and my marriage has dissolved, and like everything that was a structure in my life is gone. Even this body seems to have changed. The rules and regulations that I had have all been rendered obsolete. Like so many of my philosophical and theological views have just all been devoured. Like I cannot make sense of so much of what I've seen and experienced. And it's all because of that crazy bitch in the altar. So I mean, like, damn, you guys, Kali is real. But yeah, my life has been ruined in one sense, and it's been culminatingly glorified in another. Ah, yeah. And thank God for this idea: the sky thy roof, the grass thy bed, and food what chance may bring, well cooked or ill, judge not. That's the beauty of Indian spiritual traditions, is that we dare to love misery, we dare to hug the form of death. And whether you're inside a house or outside the house, life is as difficult for all of us as it is for any one of us. Because life is difficult, but it's in that tapasya of just living your life in as honest a way possible that one comes to make spiritual progress. And there's a certain pathway being offered by texts like the Yogini Hridaya and the Maharta Manjari. There's like a certain pathway called the Kaula or called the Vama Marga. It might call to people with like the Vira Bhava. It's awesome and valid and legitimate, and it's worth representing. Having said that, I now want to read to you a little bit from the opening of the Maharta Manjari. That's one of the texts that we're going to learn, and we have been studying it to some extent. We'll return to it. Another text is the Saundarya Lahari. The reason this has come up, and so I have here the Swami Tapasyananda version. I really love this one. This is Swami Tapasyananda of the Ramakrishna Mutt and Mission. He used to be the Acharya at the training center, and he has great books out. He's got a great Bhagavad Gita out. He's got a great Bhagavatam out, actually, and he does a lot of really good stuff on Tantrik sources. So this is the text Saundarya Lahari. It's very famous, super famous in South India. People are always composing music about it, like Muthuswami Dikshita are composing ragas for each avrana of the Sri Chakra. It's a Sri Chakra text. It's usually, though, going to be presented from a Samayakula point of view. Because it's attributed to Adi Shankaracharya, naturally then, the ones who present this text and the commentarial traditions that emerge around these texts, especially this one, they're naturally going to be the kind of Shankara Dashnami sort of flavor. That means it's Samayakula. A lot of this will be based on Lakshmidhara and the internalization and esoterization of practices that otherwise might be interpreted literally and ritualistically along Kaula lines. So when I read the Saundarya Lahari, I read it as a Kaula practitioner, not as a Samayakula practitioner. Although Swami Tapasyananda and arguably almost everyone who presents this text in the modern context will probably be reading it from a right-hand path, Shankara Dashnami, more Advaita Vedanta context. Whereas I like to read it from a more Shakta context. Thank you, G. Thank you so much. Anyway, it's not for everybody. The ones who like it, and the ones who don't like it, don't like it. Big surprise, it's the internet. Like, you know, it's good. It's like, let's be discerning. But let's be transparent. Let me offer some standards of care, standards of proof, standards of legitimacy. And the first thing I want to say about this text, Saundarya Lahari, is that like most of what you are going to hear about it or see regarding it will come from the Shankara Dashnami, Advaita Vedanta, Samayakula standpoint. And that's valid. That's based on Lakshmidhara, Lola Lakshmidhara, and some of those commentarial traditions. I tend to read this along the Bhaskara Raya line, meaning I tend to read this from a more Kaula perspective. The reason we're studying this is because we started studying the Yogini Hridaya. How many kids does it take on to screw on a light? How many ADD kids does it take to screw on a light bulb? Let's read 5 books! Okay, so the reason we're studying this is because it's awesome. And we were recently doing some Sri Vidya stuff with some people in our immediate community. And one night, we just like, it was literally like 7 or 8 hours of non-stop pravarchana. One night, I just thought to record the Sanskrit rendition. I just wanted to sing the text. Just as like a devotional offering to Ma after a puja. It was like the new moon, 2 new moons ago maybe. I just wanted to like sing the text, and I thought I would record it and share it in like a private WhatsApp group with some enthusiasts. I started singing it. I started singing the Sanskrit. I just had this Roger Orphe-Gianti English translation of André Padu's French translation of the Sanskrit text Yogini Hridaya, which is commented upon in the Deepika of Amritanandanatha. So like it's kind of convoluted, right? It's like an English translation of a French translation of a Sanskrit spiritual classic. And I thought I would just, because this copy, the one I'm holding up right now, it has translations, but I don't really agree with a lot of them. Naturally, I would translate this differently, and one day I will. But it does have the Sanskrit. And so all I wanted to do was flip through it. You can see it's a very like ritually, it's covered in turmeric and kumkum, but it's just something I wanted to like flip through and just chant in Sanskrit, make a recording of the complete Sanskrit chanting, and just send that in a group chat. But there was somebody here And I started chanting. And then she started asking me questions. And it was gorgeous. For like 8 hours, we were just like doing this thing where I would chant and then translate loosely, just like off the cuff, and then just explain. And then in explaining it, it brought something out of me. Like I was really inspired in that conversation. I have since published that conversation. I just had my voice memo recording on for the Sanskrit translation. Sanskrit just chanting, but it just turned out to be like a pravarchana commentary instead. And then I got so excited and so inspired. I was like, oh my god, we should start studying this as a group, as a community, because that was such a cool conversation. Then somebody else in our community, Bhairavananda, he showed up at my doorstep. He hadn't heard the recording whatsoever, and he was like, I've just been on a Yogini Hridaya binge. And I'm like, fuck yeah, dude. I guess it's time for the Vamakeshvara Tantra, it's time for Nitya Shodashakarnava, and it's time for these 8 chapters, which are considered to be like the closing chapters of the Vamakeshvara Mata Tantra. So I'm like, okay, there's clear indication, since Nitya Leela, my boss, told me to do this one based on one of her spiritual experiences, and because Bhairavananda had a spiritual experience that corroborated mine regarding this text, I was like, okay, party time. Let's just do both of these side by side. This will inform this. This was probably earlier than this, but I don't know. Like this Mahatma Manjari, this Shakta non-dual text, this Yogini Hridaya, which is also a Shakta non-dual text, they're going to go together because the Mahatma Manjari is like chapter 1 of this text. Chapter 2 and chapter 3 are more traditionally Tantrik. So like if you put these two texts together, I'm showing them on the screen right now, you basically get Thursdays and Fridays in one. You get the Thursday first class about Padhatis and ritual manuals, Anava Upaya. You get the Friday second class, which is all Shambhava Upaya, Vijnana Bhairava Tantra stuff. The Thursday second class. And you get the Friday morning class, which is all Shakta Upaya. And I'm like, Anava, Shakta, and Shambhava Upayas are all of them contained in the joint studying of these two texts. So that's what I want to do. Moving forward, I want to just focus on the Mahatma Manjari and I want to focus on the Yogini Hridaya until we completely master these texts, and nothing more is needed for a complete Tantric sadhana than this. Whether or not you have a guru is beside the point, I think. Better to have one, I think. I don't know, maybe there are magical, like some spiritual reasons. God forbid that there are spiritual magical principles to this that we can't like explain or understand. But like, besides that, I think if you feel comfortable studying them on your own, here they are. You can pick them up on your own, but we can learn them together. And we can have more of like an open discussion about them. More time for questions, I think, would be good. And again, I just want to go verse by verse. I just want to like translate the Sanskrit, go verse by verse, compare the commentarial traditions to other commentarial traditions, and just have discussions. And mostly discussions informed not just by the traditions, but discussions informed by, like, I think just the modern world by 2026 and by like life in the modern world. That's kind of what we can contribute. We can contribute our own contemporary commentaries on top of the existing rich, deep, and like prolific commentarial traditions that are already available. So when we study the Yogini Hridaya, I always recommend that you study it with a commentary, and the commentary of choice is the Deepika by Amritananda Natha. Amritananda Natha is very important. He is the student of one Punyananda Natha, and Punyananda Natha is the one who composed the Kama Kala Vilasa. One day we'll study that text together. It's like the Hadi Vidya prime source, like it's like the textbook for the Hadi Vidya, and almost everything we know about Hadi Vidya, Shri Vidya mantras, like Shakta, non-dual, left-hand path, Kaula Marga stuff, it comes from this Kama Kala, which the Yogini Hridaya will of course tend to like reference, if not elliptically, and very much at least in the commentary, since the commentary is by a student of the one to whom this Yogini, Kama Kala Vilasa is attributed. Okay, so that's the project ahead of us. But what about the Saundara Lahari? Like, why did this come up? So, I was recently in Seattle and Portland, as you well know, as is impossible not to know at this point. I was there, and I wanted Mahadeva. Oh, Digambari, it's so good to see you. Jaima. I missed you so much. It's so good to see you, Jaima. So, what is that? Oh, that's the sound. Okay, cool. Yeah, Saundara Lahari. And by the way, you guys, I don't really mind what version you get. So, like, you could get, like, any version. It's only important to me that you have access to the primary Sanskrit. And there are many versions that are just going to be Devanagari, and if you don't read Devanagari, then it's going to be important that you have access to some transliterated version. We're going to go off the Sanskrit, like that. Yeah, Sonu is showing, you can see here, there's the Sanskrit here, and this is what I, as, hold on, let me just, one second. So this is what I, as an instructor, will value above all. I don't care about anything that happens after the number 1 right here. I'm only interested in the Sanskrit and if you don't read Devanagari, it's going to be helpful to have it in transliteration. This is my standard of accountability. Like, I want to be accountable to what it actually says here, while admitting that there could be like a broken telephone issue, right? Like, obviously some of these words, you know, like, thank you so much, Sonu, for showing me that. Like, some of these words, you know, they're going to be like misrepresented because the manuscripts that, you know, we get can sometimes be corrupted. Especially like in certain parts of India, it's like dry, there are Mughal invasions, like the manuscripts are marred, and like one word might appear like surata, might appear to be svarata, you don't know if it's su or sva, and that could change everything. Like, yeah, with all of that in mind, just remember that there is an academic like effort to refine our manuscripts and present with OCRs, like digitized versions of those manuscripts, to the best of our ability. What can we do but just trust what we have? So your version might have different Sanskrit than mine, but I think the discrepancies are going to be so small as to be negligible, but that's what we're going to go off of. So you guys, like, Sanskrit primary sources and sticking to the verses as they are presented in those Sanskrit primary sources, that's my commitment. And that's our value as a community. All conversations about institutions and Guru Parampara are valuable and worth having, but they are secondary to me, to these texts and to the direct experience of the teaching of the text. So having said all of that, why the Saundara Lahari? Because I was in Seattle, I was in Portland, and I wanted Mahadevaji to start giving lectures. He's like 22. But that's when I started, and I was like, okay, like it'd be really good if some initiates in our tradition started giving lectures, because the best way to learn sometimes is to teach. So I thought the best way for him, and he's got the kind of mind where he like learned Sanskrit in like a week. Like, he was just really impressive. I barely needed to teach him anything. He just like learned Sanskrit on his own. He knows Japanese fluently. Like, he's just like a linguist, you know. So given that he's a linguist and he has such a love for Sanskrit and such a deep love for Tantra, I was like, all right, you choose a text, whatever you want, choose a text, and then you can start teaching it in our community. This motherfucker chose Saundara Lahari, and I'm like, classic. I'm like, Jews and Brahmins are the same. You guys are just so hyper intelligent that of course you have to choose the hardest fucking text, like the most poetic, the most convoluted Sanskrit. I'm like, you could have chosen some Vatula Natha Sutra or some kind of Yoga Sutra or something like, you know, preliminary with easier Sanskrit, but no, you chose Saundara Lahari. So I'm like, okay, fine. We are 8 verses in, I think. So Mahadeva has been giving some pravarchana. They've been excellent. I've been very impressed. And then I've been giving some commentary on top of his pravarchana. All of those are published on the Patreon. But we're verse 8 now in the Saundara Lahari. We are verse 18 in the Yogini Hridaya. And I think we're like verse 4 or 5 in the Maharta Manjari. I don't know. But that's where we are now. So these are the 3 texts. And I'm just going to focus on them moving forward until we maybe have these down, or until we just on a whim change our mind, which we're always susceptible to. So bear with me. These are the texts. And if you want to acquire them on your own, that's perfectly fine. You should. But I'm also going to try to make some PDFs, like some, you know, like Google Docs or something with our own translations as we go. Okay, cool. So to close out and open the floor to like a discussion about texts and about lineages and whatnot, let me just read to you from Professor Satya Prakash Singh Ji's translation of the Maharta Manjari. I'm going to refrain as far as possible from like doing loose translations of the Sanskrit. Let's just like look at what the verses say. I'm not going to read his commentary. Oh, this is the Maharta Manjari. I'm not going to read his commentary because I disagree with most of it. It's good, but I just think it's coming from a different place than I would come from. Not invalid, not worse, just different. So I'm not going to read his commentary. I'm just going to read you his translations of the verses, yes? And then I'm going to do this for about 10 minutes. And then for a little while, I'm just going to like give you my interpretation of what this means for us when it comes to standards of care, standards of authority, standards of legitimacy. Because it's going to answer the question, who is the deity? Who is the guru? And what is the means of attaining the deity? So let's start. You should remember that this text was not revealed by a guru, a human teacher, to our friend Maheshwarananda. Allegedly, Maheshwarananda was performing a puja on his own. Allegedly, he fell asleep or something, or in some trance state or liminal, half waking, half dreaming state. He met a yogini. So, like, by the way, I gave a lecture on the first day of the Portland retreat, actually, in Galasani's living room. And the lecture was called Tantrik Dream Initiation. Are we a legitimate lineage? And I recommend you all watch that because, like, I want to make this point that, like, people get really wrapped up in books and in institutions and in costumes and in titles. They forget that this is spiritual life. Like, it's not like an academic institution with professors and MDs and, you know, like, it is in one sense because it's been institutionalized, but it's also about God. and it's about like spirit, and therefore dreams and intuitions are very important. Like a lot of this stuff is just based on a dream that somebody had, and we recognize dreams. It's called tarka based on pratyaksha. We recognize dreams as valid, like axiomatically. So this is about a dream initiation. That's it. Like the very beginning of the text is already teaching something, right? Like, isn't that beautiful? There's something beautiful happening in our community where like we just seem to corroborate mystically through dreams and through shared experiences, like something, and it almost makes me think that Kali is real. God forbid. And so now I'm just going to read to you from a text that was not given by a human guru to a human disciple, but was revealed in dream or in mystic initiation to a sincere practitioner, and he is sharing with the world his 70-something verses based on what that quote-unquote yogini told him. Therefore, the yogini hridaya is important because it's about a teaching from the yogini, and this is also important because it's the teaching also of a yogini. So here's what the yogini says. Om sarvabhyo yoginibhyo namaha. Om sarvebhyo yogebhyo namaha. Om sarvabhyo dakinibhyo namaha. Om sarvebhyo dakebhyo namaha. Bhairavaya namaha. Okay, here we go. Bowing down on the eternally pure feet of the teacher in the form of the great illumination, Maheshwarananda is now going to compose this title, Maharta Manjari, for the sake of spreading out its fragrance. Clearly, the yogini wants him to make mainstream and make publicly accessible the inspiration that he's receiving privately and personally. Then it goes on to say, he quotes the Shiva Sutra, which is interesting. He quotes Shiva Sutra chapter 2, verse 6, Guru Upaya. The teacher is the means to access the divine. Or Guru Upaya, the way is the teacher. Guru is the way. That's like just a quote to supplement the Mangalacharana, the opening verse. Continuing, verse 2. Now, let the great light of Paramashiva expand, spreading its illumination in the form of deliberation relating to... by the way, the word deliberation is vimarsha. I know, I said I wouldn't do this. I just think deliberation is a clumsy way of translating vimarsha. Vimarsha means reflexive self-awareness. But, okay, I can see why deliberation or reflection would work, but I'm sorry. Let the great light of Paramashiva expand, spreading its illumination, prakasha, in the form of vimarsha, reflection or self-reflexivity relating to the various disciplines of knowledge. All the disciplines of knowledge end up only with determining the denominations. So that's important. He's saying that everything that we do is just naming and labeling and discerning between X, Y, and Z. That's all that knowledge is. It is by means of the act of illumination that knowledge throws its light inward as well as outward, vimarsha. Since apart from its cognizance, anything cannot be considered to be in existence, the world needs to be admitted as of the form of sheer cognizance. As an existent cannot be admitted as an object of knowledge without having been made objects of cognizance, knowledge becomes coincident to existence ultimately. So this is how the pravarchana or the commentary sounds. Notice the difference. The yogini says, let the great light of Paramashiva expand, spreading its illumination in the form of deliberation, relating to which various disciplines of knowledge end up only with determining the denominations. That's what the yogini said. And now he's trying to understand it, and he's like, oh yeah, the world must be real because the world is an object of knowledge. An object of knowledge is not a thing apart from the knower. And so there is this knowing in which a knower acquires knowledge. And that knowledge is of the nature denominations, discerning between X, Y, and Z. So this world is nothing but a conglomeration of X's, Y's, and Z's. And so this entire world is known. And in the world, things are known as being discernible from one another. And therefore, all these things must be real. And the world itself must be real because I, the knower of the world, and the world that is known, both of us exist in this act of cognizance, which is called vimarsha, which is, as you'll see in just a moment, the deity. So now the next statement. This is verse 3. Self is the root of the world. In order to prove the verity of this proposition, no one needs to ask for any evidence. Who would remain thirsty having immersed in the stream of the Ganga? So verse 3 says, don't you exist? Doubt it and see. Your very doubting of your own existence is proof of your existence. So this is just the cogito, right? It's just like Descartes realizing that like the only thing he cannot doubt is the existence of the doubter. For to doubt it is to affirm it. So that's just verse 3. The world exists. Why? Because you exist. And why do you exist? Who the fuck like can doubt that? Who can prove that you don't? You do exist. And it's like being in the Ganga. Your thirst is quenched by the moment of immersion. Similarly, your desire to know whether or not you exist is quenched the moment you desire to know it. That knowing itself, the desire itself, that's all you need as proof. Okay, moving on, verse 4. Here in the commentary, just so you can see the flavor of a commentary, the Maheshwarananda says, if the questioner were not self-luminous, he ought to have remained bereft of luminosity, like the object before its cognizance. The illumination ought not be different from self-consciousness. So to know anything is to know thyself, just like to see anything is proof of seeing. That's basically what we've learned. Then verse 4. Whosoever understands even extremely ignorant people, even those who remain always engaged in simply fetching water as their lifelong profession, and whom obeisance is made at every turn of life, and who is not obvious, being the Lord of all. So this is a very, very provocative verse, because it's against caste. If I exist as the knower of my mind and body. Where does caste exist if not in the body? Like at this time in India, probably you were born a Brahmin. So Brahmin status, the one to whom people pay obeisance, that means people bow at your feet because you are a holy man. You are that by birth, so it adheres in your body, no? And there are some people who are born into a Shudra household or a Dalit household where their job is to fetch water and they are scoffed at and looked down upon. Now, is not the self, and this is what Somananda says, is not the fire in the Brahmin's house the same as the fire in the Smashan? The funeral pyre fire and the Brahmin's household hearth, are they not both fire? And do they not have the same properties of heat and illumination? So how can you say that the Brahmin's fire is pure where the Smashan fire is impure? Fire is fire, Baba, whether in the Smashan or whether in the Brahmin's house. Similarly, like fire with its illumination, consciousness is consciousness, whether in the body of the Brahmana or the body of a Shudra or Dalit. So the claim is that this Lord of all is the self. And the self is the same in all bodies and in all minds, being the case that all bodies and minds are objects of knowledge. And the self is the one who knows, not necessarily the thing that is known. So therefore, verse 4 just obliterates, in a conventional sense, the reality of caste as being something that determines a difference between one person and another. Isn't that crazy? I won't say more now, but you can see that this has implications, very profound implications, as to spiritual authority. Because it used to argue, spiritual authority used to be adjudicated based on caste. Only a Brahmin male should be teaching these things. Because arguably only a Brahmin male would have access to Sanskrit education. But now here's a group of people, most of them, by the way, mlechas, in the sense that you would have been excluded by virtue of your birth and your race and your sex. All of you been excluded from the study of this stuff, had you not been born a Brahmin, and more importantly a Brahmin male with access to good Brahmin male tutors like Abhinavagupta. But verse 4 just says no. Anybody can learn this stuff and everybody is valid, everybody is affirmed because everybody is God. Why? Because like Somananda says, the fire in the Brahmin's house and the fire in the Smashan, it's fire nonetheless. Sorry, that's Rama. And more importantly, the fourth verse says, anybody can teach this, anybody can learn this. So Guru is the way, but the Guru might not be a person, and persons are not valid based on their caste or based on knowledge or whatever. So having said that, that's verse 4. It's very dramatic. Here's verse 5. The accessibility of perception is limited. Limited also is inference in view of its dependence on perception. It is only the agama whose light as the flame of an earthen lamp can illumine the self's glory to a certain extent. Now this is very controversial because there's a way to interpret this where you're saying that the tantras are better than anything. Like, because the word agama is used. So only the agama can serve as a light that illumines the self's glory. Everything else won't. The Vedas won't do it, the yoga text won't do it, the Vaishnava, Shaiva text won't do it, maybe, unless they're agamas. But there's another way to understand this, and I think this is a better way to understand this, because look, it starts by saying the accessibility of perception is limited. What I know is different from what you know, because what I perceive is unique to me and what you perceive is unique to you. What if I was a bird, and what if you were a fox? The things that you would see as a fox are very different from the things that I as a bird can see. And this is the opening teaching in the Chandi, in the Devi Mahatmya. The first thing that Medas Muni tells the king and tells the merchant is that perception is relative. Way before Einstein, way before Frank Lloyd Wright, like the idea of relativity was introduced in the Devi Mahatmya and the 700 verses. Like in the beginning, Medas Muni says, don't you see how everything is relative? Like you are different from every other person and every other being in the world. So what you see and what you know is going to be unique to you. And more importantly, inference that you make based on your perception is going to be based on your perception, which is wholly different from anyone else's. Isn't this the most liberal view you've ever heard? Basically, it's saying that everyone sees the world differently, and therefore, you cannot have a universality of reasoning. You cannot standardize reasoning, because even inference which is based on perception. And arguably, we are more interested in a posteriori reasoning than a priori reasoning. We had math and shit, we had logic and shit, but like our logic was always based on using real world examples. So if I'm going to argue about causality, I have to use the metaphor of smoke and fire. So in almost every discussion on causality, they'll give you this idea called hetuhu, which means invariable concomitance. If X, therefore Y. So if fire, therefore smoke. But my experience of fire and smoke is what, Vedic mathematics, but I'm going to argue against it in the sense that like mathematics is kind of masturbatory in that it's something you do in your mind without necessarily referencing the physical world, except at best in a platonic sense where you argue that like numbers are real in some archetypical way. But like arguably we don't really do math based on like quantities that you can like discern. Like here are 3 books that we're studying. 1, 2, 3. But threeness is a kind of emergent concept. It's a projection. Oh my god, Sonu, you're giving me math anxiety. No! I met someone yesterday who was afraid of fruits. They told me they had a phobia of fruits, and I'm like, do you mean you just don't like them? You just don't have a preference for fruits? It was really funny. We were in front of the Murti, and I was like, be careful in front of Kali telling her what you fear. And that's why I was like, Ma, I'm afraid of goth baddies. Please don't send them to my door. I'm so scared of them. I'm afraid of loving and devoted people. Actually, now I am. But the lady who was here yesterday, she was like, I'm afraid of mangoes and fruits. And I'm like, don't say that in front of Kali. The next thing you know, she's going to serve you mango tomorrow. But then I had chocolate. Actually, where the fuck did my chocolate go? So then I had this chocolate that someone else got for me. And it has raspberries on it, as you can see. So then I put it on the table to serve yesterday. And I put it on the table, and then she saw the raspberries. And then I saw them, and I quickly snatched the chocolate away. I'm like, I'm so sorry. Because I thought she was going to be like, raspberries. And then she laughed at me. She was like, no, I'm not afraid of them in that way. But yeah, I'm getting a math anxiety. I'm like, so no, put it away. I'm like, Shri Ramakrishna, he used to say, my head hurts. He asked M to explain gravity to him. Like, why do tides happen, right? They all went to see the Ganga flood. And Shri Ramakrishna was like, why does this happen? And then M was like, and he started drawing shit on the ground with a stick in the dirt, right? He was like, okay, here's the moon, here's the earth, here's the sun. And Shri Ramakrishna was like, stop, ow, my head hurts. So, it's a posteriori reasoning, not a priori. This is important. A posteriori means I have to have an experience and then I reason based on that experience, right? Here, the claim is that perception, like the experiences that we all have, are unique to us because some people are bats, some people are foxes, some people are birds, some people are pashus, some people are viras, some people are divyas. It's just different. We're all different. We come from different cultural backgrounds. Some of us are Protestants. A lot of the controversy that's happening on the internet right now is just, oh my god, I'm sorry. Rama, chill. A lot of what's happening on the internet right now is just Protestants who have valid, legitimate concerns with our way of presenting things and our way of living life, arguably. And a lot of Mesoamerican and South American cultures will empathize here. A lot of African American cultures will empathize here because the experience of being a marginalized group is really just like having a different way of living life. Like we just maybe party in a way that they don't like, or we just have relationships that they don't think are kosher or valid, or I don't know, we just have lifestyle choices that they might not think is okay, and then you get Ronald Reagan's war on drugs and things like that, which is arguably a crackdown on certain ethnic groups that just have different standards and different practices. This verse 5 is saying maybe it's okay that we're all different. It's like, whoa, maybe we don't have to convert everyone and make them Christian. Maybe we don't have to convert everyone and make them Muslim. In fact, maybe we don't even need to convert everyone and make them Shaktas or Shaivas or anything like that. Because arguably at the end of the day, you are going to see the world your way. And even if you try to reason and you can have all the Nyaya training you want, and Nyang Chama yesterday we were talking about what's a good book? Nyang Chama was asking me what's a good book to learn Nyaya and learn reasoning. It's actually an interesting question because sorry, maybe you don't mind, right? It's just getting a lot of pings, and I can mute it, but I'm technologically illiterate. I get math anxiety and I get technology anxiety, and I don't have my Brahmin tech support Indian right now to help me. So basically it's saying that you can learn reasoning, like Nyan Chama and I were talking about last night. There are ways to learn reasoning. There are texts that will teach you how to reason. But you know what? At the end of the day, even if you are a master of reasoning, you will still have to reason based on your perception. And so your conclusions and your reasoning is going to be different from everyone else's conclusions and reasoning, because everyone's set of experiences is going to be unique to them. That's a profound view, a view on relativism. And the claim here is that the Agama transcends all of that. The Agama is not about reasoning, and the Agama is not even about perception. It's not about seeing something or experiencing something mystical, and it's not even about the philosophies that you can generate around those things. What is it about then? And here comes verse 6. Let this confusion of entitlement arise in the mind of those who think of the self on a pattern somewhat different from that of the commonplace one, and thus are opposed to the self. And here the claim is that, like, it's going to be confusing for people to understand what we're going to say here, because everyone thinks about entitlement and about adhikari. The word adhikari here means who's competent to teach this, who's competent to receive this, what does it mean to learn this, and what does it mean to realize this. There's going to be a lot of confusion, because that's what happens when we think and talk and interact as bodies and minds. What we're going to describe now is something beyond the body and mind, and therefore there will be no confusion as to who can teach it, who can learn it. There'll be no confusion as to what it is, because it's not a specific idea or a philosophy, nor is it a specific sense perception or even mystical perception. And so all debates that arise, whether intellectual or whether anti-intellectual, all debates are going to be about mystical experiences or sensual experiences. Did you see that? No, I didn't. I saw something else. And that was Sri Ramakrishna's example of the chameleon. Somebody saw the lizard as red, somebody saw the lizard as blue, and someone else saw the lizard as green, and they all started fighting as to what color the lizard was. But remember, the reason they're fighting is because they saw the same thing, but the same thing can present itself in different ways. So, whether it's a mystical or actual meaning physical experience is beside the point, and whether it's like a philosophical idea is also beside the point. The ones who debate this and who argue this and who fight about this are called the vipakshas, or those who oppose the self. But by oppose, it just means they are ignorant of the self. Now comes verse 7. Where there is willingness, there is permissibility, and where willingness is not, there is impermissibility. This is our discretion, while the throb of the heart alone is that of the scriptures. Oh my God, you guys. This is like a 14th or 15th century text that tells you that the throb of your heart, the spanda sara, or the hridaya spanda, your own inner inspiration, that is the scripture. And what you should do and what you shouldn't do, what is permissible and what is not permissible, is based on your inspiration and on your whim. If you want to abstain from garlic and onions, if you want to avoid all meat and leek, if you want to avoid all wine and fish, if you want to like practice in like a very strict celibate way, that is scripturally enjoined. You should do that because that's what your heart desires. And if someone else wants to eat meat and drink wine as part of their worship or as part of their play, because they don't distinguish between worship and play, then again, that's their right and their will, and that is the scripture. The scripture is the throb of the heart, the spontaneous impulse towards self-expression. This is a radically modern idea, an incredibly progressive idea, and we're getting it in verse 7. And then he goes on to say, that which is within one's capability to reject, this is not the Yogini, this is the commentary, that which is within one's capability to reject deserves to be rejected, and conversely, that which one is incapable of rejecting deserves to be accepted. That's a beautiful, I'll say that again, that's a beautiful translation, I think, and Professor G like translated this perfectly. That which is within one's capability to reject deserves to be rejected. Do you see? It doesn't matter what the scriptures say, it doesn't matter what other people say. If you want to reject it, it deserves to be rejected. And conversely, that which one is incapable of rejecting deserves to be accepted. So if you cannot reject something because it's so spiritually nourishing to you, whatever that thing might be, affirm it. Go to hell if you need to get that idea. You know? Beautiful. And maybe I should read a little more from this commentary. Apparently, he wrote a text called the Samvid Ulas. I don't have access to that text. It might not be available. But he quotes his own text and he says, if the story, the vikalpa, of permissibility and impermissibility, vidhi and, vidhi means what you should do, and vaidhi means what you should not do, like what you should do and what you shouldn't do, I guess. Like, the thoughts or the concepts, I think the word concepts is better, but story is provocative. If the story of permissibility and impermissibility were to be concluded finally, only Shiva may do that by virtue of his constituting the inmost being of all, and as such having the capacity of turning permissibility into impermissibility and impermissibility into permissibility. So what someone says is not allowed, Shiva can make into something allowed. And what someone says is allowed, Shiva can make into not allowed. But who is Shiva? Pulse and throb of your own heart. For Shiva is the inmost being of all, who has the capacity to decide for themselves what is permissible and what is impermissible. And then he quotes the Kalika Agama. So in the view of the Sri Kalika Agama, actions on account of which creatures are hurled down into hell, by virtue of the same actions, wise people get elevated and become knowers of all the three phases of time, the Trikala. So if somebody drinks wine, they could go to hell. Another person drinks the same wine, they can learn the secrets of the universe. I am sorry, you guys. I ate meat and drank wine and did all this crazy Kali stuff, and it's only been beautiful and nourishing to me. And if I go to hell, I will consider it worth it. I'll see many of you there. We'll continue our worship. As Rama Devi beautifully said yesterday, right, RJG? It's going to be a party. It's going to be a fun time. We'll actually get to meet and worship together in hell. Tonight we dine in hell, says Leonidas. But like Rama was saying something so beautiful yesterday. Rama said, we will enjoy the hell that you oppose. So like, yeah, maybe we'll go to hell, but also maybe we'll realize the secrets of the universe. We'll learn Trikala, the Trikala Vidya. And the Sri Kalika Agama is the authority. So a primary source is being cited here to say that which you think is wrong and illegitimate might actually be wrong and illegitimate for you. But what someone else thinks is right and legitimate might actually be right and legitimate for them. So all I'm like really fighting for here is to be able to do the thing that we traditionally think is worth doing, even when that thing doesn't look like it's worth doing to other people. And specifically, I mean with regards to like whether or not you can study texts that your guru didn't give you, or whether or not you can practice things that your guru doesn't know or doesn't endorse or doesn't practice, as I have and as I will continue to do. Because again, I'm following the pulse and throb of my heart, my whim, and that's why a lot of people have a problem with it. They're like, this guy is doing what he wants. People should not be allowed to do what they want. They must do what they are allowed to do. They must want to do what is allowed to be done. And I want to do what I want to do, whether or not it's allowed. I think that's where the tension is, right? So like people like Karuna, people like my ex-wife, people like, a lot of people, you know, like they're valid. I really think that what they're saying on the internet about my illegitimacy as a tantric teacher is valid, but valid with regards to their spiritual nourishing, their spiritual intuitions, not valid for me. And I hope that they will have at least some way of understanding that what works for them doesn't work for me, and what works for me doesn't work for them, and we all can have different standards of legitimacy. So having said that, there's another quote from the Gyan Kaumudi, which I have not studied, maybe a regional text. It says, wherever mind happens to rest experiencing fulfillment, which else may be the field of auspiciousness apart from it. So basically this is saying if you feel good, it is good. Oh my god, I can't even tell you, this ended my marriage. This like legitimately ended my marriage. Like the biggest disagreement that I had with my ex-wife was this, whether or not pleasure was good. I argued that puja should be fun and beautiful, and that anything in life that was fun and beautiful was holy and spiritual. But my ex-wife felt that it was a distraction, that it was going to be something that like was spiritually debilitating, not spiritually nourishing. She felt disillusioned by this view from the allegedly Gyan Indu Kaumudi. Wherever mind happens to rest experiencing fulfillment, which else may be the field of auspiciousness apart from it? So what else is there in life but allowing your mind to flow towards that which is beautiful? And this, like for a lot of people, sounds like charvaka. It's like just hedonism, right? So, oh my god, that means I should just enjoy the world? That's not what I learned. My Protestant ethics told me that wisdom with the world is foolishness with God. Like, my Christianity made me feel guilty and ashamed. And again, I don't say any of this pejoratively. I think it's valid. Some people actually feel this way. They feel like if they enjoy anything, they won't actually enjoy it because they'll feel guilty about it. And that's why they're all addicted to drugs. Like, if I drink liquor and if I do an intoxicant, my life is okay. I'm like, fine, I'm happy. But like other people, if they drink a little bit of wine, they just like spiral or something. And I had an ex actually. She was found in a hotel room. She had OD'd. And when we were dating, I was in a rock band at the time. And of course, the intoxicants on tour are like unbelievable. So we're both doing a lot of drugs together and doing the same drugs together. But she died, and it was so sad. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, one night, I remember there was a particular party. We were all just bouncing in a bouncy castle. And later that night, actually maybe I should pause the recording. Having said that story, I think it's important to point out that we all respond to life differently, as per verse 4. And so having said that, wherever the mind happens to rest experiencing fulfillment, which else may be the field of auspiciousness apart from it? Like, there are some people who will find fulfillment in rejecting pleasure. That's an important point. That's where their mind finds fulfillment. That's valid. Again, we're not trying to say that if you don't like chocolate cake, you must eat chocolate cake. We're just saying that if you like chocolate cake, keep eating chocolate cake, you'll find God through chocolate cake. Because today's chocolate cake will be tomorrow's samadhi. That's our claim. That if you just allow your mind to follow bliss, you will naturally, spontaneously and easily be led to the source of bliss. Because things get boring and you move on to the next thing. But the way to move, the way to like project yourself outward creatively is to follow your bliss, in a sense. And your bliss might actually be in rejecting onions and garlic and meat and wine, and that's also valid. So this verse was arguably why my marriage dissolved. We just had like vastly different views as to what spirituality looked like, and they were both valid. Now the question is whether or not the Ramakrishna mission weighs in on this. And I think they do. I think the public-facing like statement from the Ramakrishna mission, with all of its Diksha gurus included, is that Vamachara and Kaulachara, which has this view that you should do whatever you want to do following your own inspiration, whether or not your guru approves of it, whether or not it's in a text, like that, I think the Ramakrishna mission both supports and doesn't support, and that's why it's confusing. It's very confusing to like understand what the Ramakrishna mission is saying, because they'll say the most Kaula shit, like, and then at the same breath denounce Vamachara and Kaulachara. You know, like I think it's just because those words are politically incorrect. Whereas the philosophies are really good. And I think what the Ramakrishna mission is doing really well is it's somehow like Abhinavagupta in the Paramarthasara, presenting the most Kaula views, but divested of all of its baggage. It's like teaching God to Americans by calling him Brahman. You know what I mean? Okay, so having said that, from the Vijnana Bhairava now, a quote. All of these talks of Vidhi and Nisheda, sorry, the word is Nisheda, Vidhi and Nisheda, are meant to serve as instances of attracting and frightening children through sweetmeats. That was what I said earlier. In verse 7, they're like saying, it's funny. It's like all this stuff in the Tantra is what you should eat, what you shouldn't eat, what you should wear, what you shouldn't wear, what mantra you should say, what mantra you shouldn't say. All of that's funny because it's just helpful for children, the way sweets would be, or scary stories would be. It's not ultimately real. What is real is the throb of your own heart. Continuing, due to one's heart turning away from thorough examination of the real nature of things, the world gets deluded by the feet of the world, just as an individual becomes afraid of the poison of a snake, of delusion. So now we're pandering to the yogis. We're saying your own heart might turn away from the world because it's disillusioned and deluded, and it might become afraid of the world as you are afraid of the poison of the snake. Shiva, as pure and autonomous self, throbs constantly in consciousness, and this supernal force has arisen via the senses, then has come to throb this entire world as a combination of enjoyment and oneness of the self. I do not know where lies the mystic sound as unmixed with the processes of the world. So in verse 8, it's saying that you might want to turn away from the world because you sense it's like the poison of a snake, having become disillusioned and deluded by it. But then verse 8 goes on to say that no, you can't actually do this because there is no transcendent thing beyond and apart from the world. It's mixed in with the world. The reality you're seeking is throbbing and pulsing in all things as all things, and it's the complete admixture of good and bad, delusion and knowledge. And in verse 9, it goes on to say, as a gem of excellent quality, in spite of having been covered, spreads out its luster through its rays, even so the self, although self-evident in its luster, appears to the ordinary people in bedimmed form. Until he becomes revealed in his extremely clear form, he is apparently bedimmed. The light of Shiva illumines upward as the lamp of auspiciousness of both the luminous and the unillumined via the face of contemplation, vimarsha, in the same way as the drop of oil removes the darkness by means of it reaching the end of a wick. So now we get very, very mystical language about Kundalini rising, like the drop of oil flowing up the wick, and then this like Jyotirlinga or erection of Shiva's like rising Ula Solasa, rising illumination, and then what is bedimmed becomes effulgent. So the claim here is that like you are perfectly valid. And I'm gonna stop there, verse 9. You are perfectly valid wherever you are in this process of Ula Solasa. So there's a time in your spiritual life, as certainly there was in mine, where the world seemed dangerous, or rather it seemed like a distraction, or at the very least it seemed like not that good, compared to closing my eyes and experiencing the bliss of meditation. Like there was something that I felt that was good and better than anything the world had to give me. And my God, I tried the world. I mean, like, I usually tell people, like, unless you've had some good, like, backstage rock and roll orgies, and unless you've tried all the drugs in Los Angeles, like, don't close your account with the world yet. There's some, like, pretty cool shit that you can experience. There's some really cool hotels with some really cool bars. I went to a bar which was all, like, an igloo, like, everything was made of ice and shit, and the drinks were all served in ice, and I'm like, what is this Gandharva Loka? Like, you know, I was privileged in that way, and that I got to enjoy so much of this world. It's been beautiful. And then, having enjoyed it, at age like 22 or 23, I was just kind of like, yeah, you know what? There's something deeper and more beautiful, and therefore I'm going to turn away. I'm going to stop going to the bars, and I'm going to stop. Digambari and I were once joking about like the drunkards. Like I became a different kind of drunkard. Like my choice of liquor was no longer like going to a nightclub. My choice of liquor was like a kirtan and like a puja, and like I was like, this is it. And that was years and years and years. And then something just happened where it just became clear to me that the joy that I had in puja, in japa, and in meditation, it was actually even more when I was at the bar. It was even more when I was out in the world eating Wagyu beef or something. Because not only was this light not bedimmed, but in one weird way, it was even more glorious that it could be enjoyed in and through those things that I had previously rejected. So maybe there's like a three-part journey here, where in the beginning you love the world, in the middle you hate the world, and in the end you love the world. I don't know what it could be, but the fact of the matter is, I live my life very differently now than I did 2 years ago, or at least a year ago. Like it's changed a lot for me. My idea about spirituality and about spiritual practice, my ideas about God have changed, and that has to do with my experience. And so I think a lot of people look at my life now and they're like, oh, he's fallen. He's like fallen back. He's regressed. Maybe that's true, but I don't really have anything else to go off of except my own experience, and I kind of trust that, you know. I don't know, maybe it's wrong for me to. Maybe the Pashubhava people say we should trust the people in authority, positions of authority or institutions. We should trust maybe even the texts over our own experience. But to me, the texts are more important than the people, and the people are more important than the institutions. But more important than the institution, more important than the people, more important than the text is my own lived experience. And the way that I feel now, this is my only data. And the data that I have, unfortunately, for better or for worse, not for me, but for others who are judging me, unfortunately, this is the happiest I've ever been. You know, this is the deepest I've ever felt spiritual life, the most consistent spirituality I've ever experienced. The joy of meditation, the bliss of japa, the bliss of kirtan, that was like a refined drug. It would come and it would go. This that I feel now doesn't come nor does it go. It's not contingent upon what practices I do or not do. It's not contingent upon what I eat or what I don't eat. It's not contingent upon being in the Grand Hyatt or being under the tree. And that's why it was important to me in Seattle that we sadhu'd it up for a little while. I love just sleeping outside with you all. That was really cool. I wanted you to have that Kashi experience. But then the very next day, we literally spent all of our money. I just like emptied out my bank account on a hotel room at the Grand Hyatt because I was like, well, like check this out. We were under the trees. We had nothing to eat. We're just sleeping on the ground in the cold. And now we're in a hotel eating this fine Wagyu beef. And notice, isn't it the same? Like the experience, the joy of life is pulsing and throbbing with equal intensity under the tree in the park at night in the cold and in this bath, sauna, spa, Grand Hyatt experience. We didn't actually get to go to the sauna or the spa. We were just having too much fun in the hotel room. But like the claim is that like whether in the court of the Maharaja or under a tree, the sky thy roof, the grass thy bed, food what chance may bring, well cooked or ill, judge not. There is a joy, and it's an advaitic joy, a non-dual joy that is like a light that shines in all things as all things. So having said that, this, I'm going to close here, this Maharta Manjari is a text about that. It's a text about the experience of Shakti in all things as all things. It's a text about the world as God, not as an obstacle to God or as a veil for God or as an illusion in God, but in and of itself as God. And God here being defined not as, importantly, the knower nor even the known. It's not an object, so it's not a debate between Vishnu or Shiva and Shakti or Shakti and Jesus. It's not even about perception, whether mystical or sensual, nor is it even about the inference and the reasoning that arises based on that perception, which is going to be incredibly idiosyncratic through and through. It's about something even deeper than that, something which cannot be debated, the indubitability of the self, which can be opened up to, which is opening itself up to itself in each and every moment through every experience. And that is the spirituality that I'm most inspired by, and the spirituality that I most want to teach, because the spirituality that says yes, yes to everything. Who dares misery love? Who dares dance destruction's dance? And who dares embrace the joys and pleasures of the world, recognizing God in all things, through all things? And what could that person do to harm any other person? A person who is truly free in this way will never judge another person. They will never look at a person and say what you're doing is wrong. They will say what you're doing is right by you. It's not necessarily what I should be doing. Like this kind of person will value consent, autonomy, sovereignty, and freedom above all. And in fact, the reason I'm getting backlash for Seattle was because I chose a person's sovereignty and autonomy over standards of care that they feel like we should have as a community upheld. They felt that we should send a person back to their family, send a person to a psychiatric institution, and like that wasn't that person's choice. And to me, that person's choice was way more important than everything else. So I've only ever affirmed in others their choice, and often that's looked like, for the world, affirming bad choices in people. And I'll continue to do so, because I will only choose based on my own inspiration. And I pray to Kali that if I can do any one thing in life, it's that I can show up in the world in a way where the space around me and the space within me is a space of maximal sovereignty, maximal autonomy, and maximal choice. Because I believe that each and every one of us has the power and strength and courage to own up to and be responsible for and face the consequences of all of our actions that we are each and every one of us in every moment entitled to make. May this be an offering to that freedom itself, which is God. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Shri Sarada Arpanamastu. Shri Vivekananda Arpanamastu. Shri Guru Arpanamastu. Shri Sangha Arpanamastu. Rama.